Chapter 1467. The gigantic ancient dragon's tomb had been completely occupied by the magi that had swarmed in. Sporadic battles were still going on outside. Some of the newly awakened dragon tomb guards and dragon souls were invincible to normal grave robbers. But to the well-prepared elite wizards, they were just a bunch of high-grade undead creatures that were hard to deal with. Soul Reaping Spell, War Spirit Spell, Death Barrier, Anti-Magic Field, Protection against Evil. As an elite wizard, there were simply too many ways to deal with these old antiques who had been asleep for thousands of years and whose brains were a little messed up. If they couldn't do it, they could also use some spells that were powered by positive energy to inflict great damage on them. However, in order to maximize their profits, no one was willing to waste the high-grade materials that represented magic crystals and turn them into dust. Grim ate the meat, and the rest of the soup went to the wizards who followed him. The dragon's ancient tomb wasn't small by any means. Hundreds of giant dragon skeletons were buried in a strange space with a radius of tens of miles. Some of the dragon skeletons were half buried in the soil, with traces of the passage of time on them. Some had fused with the mountain rocks, turning into a grayish-white, fossil-like appearance. But without exception, in this magical space, their skeletons were overflowing with a dense aura of death that was so dense that it was almost solid. The dragon tomb guards formed from their skeletons, and the specter dragons formed from the dragon souls became the main obstacles for the wizards to plunder the spoils of war. Groups of wizards skillfully took out soul-reaping wands or war spirit scrolls and tied up the phantom dragons with elemental chains. Then, they carefully put them into soul crystals or soul urns. As for the rampaging dragon tomb guards, they could only rely on the anatomy refinery sorcerers who were covered with layers of defensive enchantments or anti-magic force fields to break them up. Every time a guardian's body was broken into pieces, the magi would burst into cheers. Then, they would quickly pick up the high-ranked giant dragon skeletons one by one. While the sorcerers were collecting their spoils of war, Grim and Remy were circling around the small dragon bone altar, sizing it up. For some reason, Grim had a strange feeling that he had missed something important. As a great sorcerer, there was almost no possibility of his perception being wrong. As long as his heart felt something, it would inevitably indicate that something unfavorable was happening outside of his perception. It was just that Grim did not practice prophecy, so he could not determine the source of this unknown danger. However, this matter had arisen because of the exploration of the dragon tomb. It was certain that this dragon lich was the culprit. Grim picked up the dragon lich whose limbs were about to be melted by the venom and raised it in front of his eyes. He stared coldly at the dragon lich's narrow and fierce green eyes and said sternly, "Little guy, don't play tricks in front of me, or I'll make you." Before he could finish, Grim's voice stopped abruptly. The A.I. Chip's warning sounded in his mind. Beep. Faith mark detected in the depths of target's soul. Faith waymark. Grim's heart skipped a beat as information about this flooded his mind. Faith waymarks were a special method of spatial positioning and were a sign that a devout believer was noticed by the god they worshipped. Through the waymark, the god could sense the life and death of their worshippers even if they were millions of miles away. If a worshipper died in an accident, the waymark would automatically turn into a channel and send the worshipper's soul into the god's divine kingdom. This process was spontaneous and could not be interfered with. If someone intercepted the worshipper's soul, it would easily attract the attention of the god. Under normal circumstances, no one would be willing to provoke the high and mighty gods for the sake of a worshipper's soul. However, there were many times when it was necessary to silence the worshipper's soul. Although Grim had no intention of silencing the dragon lich, the fact that the dragon lich's soul contained a waymark of faith shocked him, and he found it inconceivable. After all, the dragon lich was a creature that had transcended the realm of living beings and was an undead creature through and through. Such a taboo was not allowed even within the dragon clan. Under normal circumstances, large dragon tombs were usually guarded and managed by the dragons appointed by the dragon clan. The interior of the tombs would also have dragon spells set up to prevent undead dragons from appearing. Only those neglected or abandoned dragon tombs could give birth to dragon tomb guards or dragon liches, such as the undead dragon clan. Since there was even a dragon lich in this tomb, it must have been abandoned by the dragon clan. But if that was the case, how could the waymark of faith in the dragon lich's soul be explained? Could it be that the dragon clan could accept the power of faith of an undead dragon? Strange, evil, and inexplicable. Evil Magus, just wait to suffer the wrath of the dragon clan. Sinclair won't let you go. Although the Dracolic had lost its ability to resist, it was still cursing loudly with its green eyes. Grim was slightly taken aback when he heard the name that the Dracolic mentioned. Sinclair? That name sounded familiar. That's right, this was the powerful female dragon that had sworn to follow the Dragon of Night, Ferazer. She was also one of the famous evil dragons in the multiverse. If she was the Dragon Lich's backer, then everything made sense. However, just as Grim was pondering silently, Chip's urgent prompt sounded in his mind. Beep. Strange spatial positioning signal detected. Signal source. Dragon bone altar. What? Hearing this news, Grim's heart tightened. He raised his right hand and instantly condensed a huge amount of flame energy. With a bang, he slammed it onto the small dragon bone altar. With a crisp crack, the dragon bone altar collapsed. The shattered dragon bones fell to the ground, revealing a small and exquisite mysterious formation of light. White light flickered within the formation, and according to some mysterious pattern, it was sending an unknown signal to a certain place in the void. Grim's eyes sharpened, and he snorted angrily. How dare you play this kind of trick right under my nose? Oomph. Having said this, Grim stretched out his large hand. Blazing red flames instantly ignited on it, and he viciously grabbed at the mysterious formation of light. However, unexpectedly, the large flaming hand grabbed nothing but air. It was as if the formation of light was just an illusion without a physical body. The large flaming hand tossed and turned many times, but it was unable to damage it in the slightest. Was the formation of light really an illusion? Grim was the first to not believe it, because the mysterious signal that the AI chip had sensed was real. This meant that this strange formation of light had a unique spatial characteristic. It seemed to be within the space of the dragon's tomb, but in reality, it was located in a completely different space. As for how the other party managed to project him into this space, Grim had no idea either, and it was difficult for him to figure it out. Chip, can you find the true location of the formation of light? Grim could not help but order the chip. Beep. This is a special spatial layer usage technique. The light formation isn't located in any alternate space, but between two adjacent spaces. Without a specific method of communication, it's impossible to find the spatial location of the light formation. Communication method. Grim turned to look at the dragon lich, who was still cursing incessantly, and naturally knew that there was a method of communication hidden in its mind. However, time was of the essence. Even if he used the soul-searching spell to force it, the chances of obtaining the memory fragments that he wanted was less than 20%. Hence, Grim's brows furrowed, and he asked coldly, "Is there no other way to touch this formation of light?" Yes, the power of laws. Since the formation of light has been projected into this plane, it definitely has a special method of communication with the power of laws here. Ordinary methods might not be able to touch it, but the power of laws will definitely be able to touch it. The power of laws? You should have said so earlier. Grim was overjoyed. The flaming hand that had reached into the formation of light suddenly retracted its brilliance, and the terrifying heat was quickly replaced by a transparent golden flame. Inextinguishable flames covered Grim's palm, and transparent threads of energy began to silently affect the surrounding void. As expected, the law of flames vibrated, and the mysterious formation of light began to tremble. Analyzing the frequency of the undulations of laws. Estimated time of completion, 7 minutes 25 seconds. Beep. Warning, warning. Signs of the descent of a mysterious will. Estimated time of arrival, 5 minutes 36 seconds. Two pieces of information entered Grimm's mind at the same time. The first made him happy, while the second made him shocked. Descent, bastard. No wonder the Dragon Lich was so stubborn. It had been acting as a spatial beacon all along, guiding the mysterious wolf on the other side to descend here. Grimm made up his mind, and the power of his right hand that was inserted into the formation increased once again. Violent and ferocious law of flames surged into the strange spatial singularity at the center of the formation of light, wanting to destroy it in one fell swoop. Without this spatial singularity, the other party would lose the ability to locate him. If it wanted to extend its will across millions of miles of the endless sea of stars, it would have to wait until it became the master of this space. However, the mysterious will on the other side of the formation of light seemed to have sensed Grimm's actions, and an extremely terrifying dragon aura surged through the void into his consciousness. "Stop it, arrogant bastard. You can't destroy the spatial waymark that I've set up. I'll give you a few minutes to escape. When I get there, I'll definitely teach you a lesson." With such a powerful dragon aura, Grimm was certain that the person on the other side of the formation of light was Sinclair, the Dragon Lich had mentioned. It was said that this evil little female dragon was a terrifying existence at rank 6. If she used the spatial waymark to appear in this plane, none of the Magi here would have good time. Even a great magus like Grimm would find it difficult to escape unscathed. Chapter 1468. Salem. Bring everyone back to Damodar City immediately. No matter what happens on my side, don't turn back. Remember, the first thing you do when you return is to ask Lord Fong Li for help. Ask him to support me if necessary. Grimm's huge power of the will poured into the rune-light circle in a frenzy. While fighting against the mysterious will, he also imprinted these words into the mind of the leading wizard. "Let's go. I can only buy you 6 minutes at most. Remember to run." Following Grimm's roar, the wizards who were still frantically digging dragon bones in the necropolis began to gather together in bewilderment. Under Salem's lead, they quickly rushed out of the dragon's ancient tomb and summoned the wyverns that were resting in the forest. Then, they rose into the sky with great difficulty, spreading their wings and fleeing in the direction they came from. Even though they had no idea what had just happened, they had to obey the great magus orders. Hence, without hesitation, all the wyverns used all their strength to flee for their lives under the command of the magus. After running for less than 30 miles, there was an earth-shattering sound behind them. The tall cliff in the depths of the forest suddenly collapsed, and the undulating green forest shook violently like an awakened dragon. Thick pillars of dust soared into the sky, and patches of ancient trees were swallowed by the earth. The entire scene was as terrifying as the end of the world. But this was not the end. The violent shockwave pushed the mud, dust, and broken wood in all directions. Everything was stirred up like a monstrous wave that instantly caught up to the Magi and engulfed them in the violent shockwave. All the sorcerers propped up their protective barriers, including themselves and the wyverns beneath them. While enduring the crackling sounds of the random items hitting him, he rolled forward uncontrollably without distinguishing between north, south, east, and west. Only after flying for 100 miles did the shockwave slowly dissipate. Sorcerers riding on wyverns emerged from the smoke and dust that filled the sky, their faces covered in dirt. "What is this terrifying thing? Sir, what do you think of us?" The deputy asked hesitantly as he steered the wyvern closer to Captain Salem. They were following the great wizard Grimm out. If anything happened to the great wizard, they would be severely punished even if they escaped back to the camp. Therefore, he had to be concerned about this matter. "You don't need to say any more. We will immediately rush back to Damodar City." It was an order from Lord Grimm himself. Besides, judging from the aura, the enemy must be a powerful, transcendent existence. It doesn't matter whether we're here or not. We can't help Lord Grimm at all. Cough. As a Tier 4 elite sorcerer, Salem was an influential figure in his own plane, a top-notch powerhouse that was renowned throughout the universe. But in this strange and unpredictable planar battlefield, any random enemy that popped out possessed such terrifying power. This caused him to be reduced to an insignificant, inconsequential figure. To be honest, this feeling was really unpleasant. But no matter how unhappy he was, his priority was to stay alive. Only by staying alive would he be able to complete Lord Grimm's request. Therefore, under Salem's command, the Wyverns did not stop and charged towards Dan and Mojwa's city, which was tens of thousands of miles away. While they were running for their lives, Grimm was also running for his life. The endless sea of trees retreated rapidly under his feet. That peerlessly terrifying figure was still hot on his heels. Grimm had already used all his means to escape, but he still could not shake off the annoying evil dragon that was like maggots in his bones. He turned into a ball of invisible flames and flew in the sky, leaving behind a trail of flames that was almost 100 miles long. Every time the evil dragon was about to catch up, Grimm would suddenly use Flame Leap to increase the distance between them by 1,000 meters. He would then enter a flame teleportation gate that was rapidly opening. Even with Grimm's powerful strength, this flame teleportation gate could only allow him to escape 200 to 300 miles away. To the evil female dragon Sinclair, who was determined to kill him, it would only take her less than a quarter of an hour to catch up. Therefore, at this moment, Grimm had turned into a huge ball of flames and used Flame Leap, Flame Teleportation, and Flame Flight to their limits to escape from that terrifying evil dragon. One had to admit that the thoughts of these evil dragons were indeed different from those of ordinary creatures. It could also be said that the thoughts of all evil creatures were completely different from those of ordinary creatures. As a rank 6 evil dragon, Sinclair would have to endure the terrifying backlash and suppression of the plane if he rashly charged into it. If this was an ambush set up for her by some enemy, this little female dragon would have been either dead or heavily injured and would not be able to live for long. However, Sinclair did not seem to be worried about that at all. With the guidance of the mysterious light formation, he crossed countless dimensions and worlds. He crossed hundreds of millions of miles and charged into the dragon's ancient tomb in the Gale dimension. Grimm was caught unprepared by Lee's unscrupulous and unrestrained behavior. Originally, he thought that this little female dragon that belonged to the evil dragon faction would choose to use a projection of her strength to probe the situation here. He did not expect her to charge into the planar plane with her terrifying and powerful main body. As soon as the rank 6 evil dragon's body squeezed into the plane, it instantly destroyed the mysterious light formation. It also smashed the dragon's ancient tomb into countless spatial fragments that scattered all over the ground. The powerful evil dragon's mighty strength clashed with the planar plane power, causing the terrifying shockwaves that Salem and the others witnessed with their own eyes. Even with Sinclair's powerful strength, it could not unleash its original strength at the Grade 6 Evil Dragon realm. However, it still relied on its powerful strength to suppress Grimm and Remy. Under Grimm's instructions, Remy originally wanted to take advantage of the fact that the evil Dragon Emperor was restrained by the planar plane power and could not move. However, he was smashed into a pie by the evil Dragon Emperor. If Remy was not the artifact spirit of the Grade 5 divine weapon, the Book of Darkness, he would have already perished. Once he felt that something was amiss, Grimm did not say anything further. He turned around and rushed out of the Holy Dragon Valley, desperately fleeing into the distance. Fleeing back to Damodar City was out of the question. With the terrifying might of the evil Dragon Emperor, she would definitely dare to chase him into Damodar City and turn it into ruins. Although there was a Grade 6 great sorcerer like Feng Li and a few other Grade 5 companions in the city, even if they gathered all their strength, it would be difficult for them to contend against the little female dragon. If Damodar City was destroyed, this mission would be considered a failure. Therefore, in a split second, Grimm decided on the direction he was going to escape to. Boom, boom, boom. Along the way, a straight and clear path of fire stretched across the sky of the Gale Plain, heading towards the largest city in the Orc Kingdom, Winter Castle. Not only was Winter Castle the largest orc city in the Orc Kingdom, it was also the location of the main temple protected by the orc god's violent power. This was the capital of all orcs and the holy city in the hearts of all believers of the orc god. To put it bluntly, if the orc warriors of the Gale Plain wanted to advance to a higher rank, they had to come to the main temple of the orc god to accept the orc god's mission and use their bravery and piety to seek orc god's protection. Only then could they bathe in the light of the orc god and complete their advancement. From a certain point of view, the orc god had already replaced the consciousness of the plane, becoming the only option for the orcs of the Gale Plain to increase their strength. This also resulted in the orcs being the sole ruler of the Gale Plain. No other intelligent race could compete with them for control of the plane. Winter Castle was located in the center of the vast Coldwind Plains, which was also the core of the entire Gale Plain. Hence, on this vast and cold land, there was a huge population of orcs that far exceeded the capacity of the plane. The Coldwind Plains was tens of thousands of miles wide, and almost all of it was frozen soil that could not be cut by swords. The temperature here was 30 to 40 degrees below zero all year round, and the biting cold wind never stopped blowing. There was no way to plant or graze on the surface of the ground. But it was also the cruel natural environment here that nurtured the ferocious orcs of the Gale Plain. Here, they fought against the heavens, against the earth, and against the powerful and terrifying magical beasts. With the protection of the orc god, they multiplied and became stronger generation after generation, and became a powerful tribe that ruled the entire plain. But the places where the power of faith appeared also had various shortcomings. One of the biggest drawbacks was that the entire tribe and the entire social class respected the strong and took pride in their physical strength. This also blocked the path to other forms of power. There were not many elemental spellcasters in the Gale Plain, because the power of the orc god was almost insulated from the elements. Hence, some of the elites might become orc shamans, but they would never be able to develop an independent elemental spell-casting system outside of the orc god's power. Orc society did not have scholars, sages, prophets, or other knowledge professions. Even if these fellows had a good foundation and talent, when their power was not up to standard, they would be reduced to the bottom of the tribe. If they couldn't even fill their stomachs, what qualifications did they have to research and promote the obscure and incomprehensible knowledge inheritance system? Therefore, it was precisely because of the existence of the belief in the beast deity that the fire of civilization and the development of knowledge and wisdom were severely suppressed. Although it would strengthen the beast god's faith and purity, it would also tie the Carriered orcs to the beast god war chariot without a choice. Of course, this was only the opinion of the four magi. The local Carriered orcs were proud of their simple and primitive way of life and their firm belief. Chapter 1469. Coldwind Plains. Even though the war outside was in full swing, this place was still shrouded in a bone-chilling cold. On the flat and solid road leading to the Winter Castle, bull carts were lined up in a row, blocking the road tightly and airtight. The carts were loaded with food and liquor. The oxen pulling the carts were not ordinary oxen, but split-toed oxen, a specialty of the Coldwind Plains. These oxen were extremely strong, and their bodies were rich in fat, allowing them to withstand the onslaught of the terrifying cold wind. Hence, they became the main livestock used to transport goods. A small ox cart was mixed in with the people coming and going on the main road. It crushed the ice on the frozen ground and slowly headed towards the majestic Winter Castle at the end of the horizon. Silently, a corner of the thick wolfskin mattress covering the carriage was lifted, revealing a young orc boy with a childish face. His nose was red from the cold, and there were even 2 wisps of white frost hanging under it. He curiously looked at everything around him, especially those orc warriors who were only wrapped in a soft robe made of animal skin. Most of their chests were exposed to the cold wind, but they were still fearless. He couldn't help but admire them. His dream was to become a true orc warrior and become the pride and glory of the entire tribe. By then, Dania would probably see him in a different light. Just as the young orc was nibbling on his finger, immersed in his own fantasies, the old orc driving the cart turned around and patted his head dotingly. He grumbled, "Hurry up and pull your head back. It's cold outside. Be careful not to—" At this point, the old man's voice suddenly froze. His wrinkled green face suddenly revealed a horrified expression, and his turbid eyes stared straight through the young orc's head, staring at the distant horizon. The young orc suddenly turned around, and what he saw was a terrifying heavenly fire burning across the horizon. The sky was burning through. The sky of the Coldwind Plains was burning. A straight and clear path of fire extended and burned high up in the sky. Everywhere it passed, countless golden flames rained down from the sky, igniting everything on the ground. Every wisp of golden flame was as dazzling as a meteor, indescribably beautiful. But when they fell from the sky in a golden arc, they brought a terrible disaster to the land ruled by the bitter cold. Bang, bang, bang. Wisps of golden flames fell to the ground and exploded into a circle of huge fire waves that slowly spread out. Although the waves of fire were thin, they had a terrifying temperature that could melt gold and melt iron. Not to mention the body of flesh and blood. Even the giant rock that was covered in a layer of ice and was sturdier than steel could not resist the burning of the golden flames. Wherever the fire wave passed, the ground would be scorched black. Be it the frozen ground or the tall and straight beast god statues, they were all melted in a semi-liquid magma in the flames, turning the entire Coldwind Plains into a boiling sea of fire. The orc elder and the youth were stunned as they watched the path of fire in the sky burn over their heads. Then, they watched as the flames drifted down and exploded into huge rings of fire, engulfing everything around them in waves of fire that soared into the sky. At first, some of the orcs could still be heard screaming in fear, but as the rain of fire fell, everything became quiet. Wherever the waves of fire touched, the beastmen would instantly explode into miniature torches. Even the ox carts filled with goods would burn into a huge bonfire. Frightened, the slit-toed bull broke free from its ropes and fled in all directions. Before it could escape far, a flame floated down, and the waves of fire spread in all directions. It turned into a ball of fire and struggled to run a few steps before falling head first, never to get up again. Under the gaze of the young beastman, even the powerful beastman warriors couldn't resist the golden flames that seemed like they could destroy the world. Watching the beastmen around him being incinerated into ashes and the carriages being burned to ashes, he was terrified, but he had nowhere to run. He could only hug the old man tightly and beg for the beast god's protection at the top of his voice. As if the beast god had manifested, even though the heavenly fire was as dense as rain and had turned one side of the Coldwind Plains into a sea of fire, the small ox cart was the only one that was left behind. However, just as the two orcs were trembling in the sea of fire, a loud and clear dragon roar sounded in the distant sky again. The layers of fire clouds that had already been ignited were pushed by a strong force and surged toward the direction of the path of fire. When it was not far above the two orcs' heads, the fire clouds broke apart, and the figure of a huge and ferocious dragon appeared in the sky. The 100-meter-long dragon raised its neck and let out another loud roar, before flapping its wings and pursuing the path of fire. When the piercingly cold dragon's might poured down, the old man and the young man's weak flames of life were instantly extinguished. Only two stiff bodies were left hugging each other tightly, standing alone on the burning plain. They were actually frightened to death by the evil dragon Sinclair's terrifying draconic might. Grim was completely unaware of what was happening below him. At this moment, he was no longer interested in slaughtering these orc civilians who were as insignificant as ants. All his attention was focused on how to get rid of the terrifying god of plagues behind him. As for the disaster that the flames would bring to the orcs along the way, that was not something that Grim needed to consider. He did not do it on purpose, but as a super-rank fire wizard, his every move would inevitably affect everything around him. Along the way, Grimm had tried to create fire clones countless times, using the method of suddenly exploding into 4 or 5 identical fire figures to distract the evil little female dragon. In the beginning, the evil little female dragon was still interested in killing the fire clones one by one with explosive dragon breaths. However, as Grimm continued to run, Synchra also became furious and anxious. She began to focus on chasing after Grimm's main body, ignoring the fire clones. She could clearly sense that the further she flew, the denser the power of faith in the air became. This meant that there was a powerful god's temple not far ahead. As a grade 6 evil dragon, Synchra's intelligence was not inferior to any opponent of the same level. It was just that her cruel and tyrannical emotions always interfered with normal thinking and rational analysis, which led to her always doing some shocking, unimaginable, and terrifying things. Sinclair could almost guess what the little worm in front of him was thinking behind every move it made. This detestable fellow must be using the temple as a cover to escape from his pursuit. It's just a beast god's temple, not a real god's kingdom. Does that annoying little worm really think that he can scare me off with this little bit of power? With infinite loathing and rage, Sinclair flapped his colorful dragon wings hard and chased after the petite flame humanoid 1,000 meters away as fast as lightning. Today, even if I have to chase you to the ends of the earth, I will tear you into pieces. This is the only way to vent my anger for destroying my spatial waymark. Stay. After saying that, Synchra opened her mouth, and a strange dragon breath, surrounded by black smoke, traversed 1,000 meters and appeared directly behind Grimm, who was flying at high speed. Feeling the terrifying dragon breath that was enough to shake the soul, Grimm did not hesitate to explode his body and split into 4 flames of different shapes and sizes, escaping in different directions. The black smoke dragon's breath seemed to have a mind of its own. It was able to change directions in midair and chased after the largest fireball, forcing Grimm to explode again. Several fireballs collided with the black smoke dragon's breath, and only then did he manage to detonate the power within it. Bang! A muffled explosion sounded. A black halo suddenly exploded in midair. Wherever the halo covered, the flames were instantly extinguished, and all the elemental substances instantly lost their activity. Even the consciousness attached to them was annihilated at the same time. Grimm, who was struggling to escape 1,000 meters away, once again reformed into a fire figure. He looked back, unable to hide the shock and horror in his heart. Even the consciousness attached to the elemental particles was annihilated. Just this strange black smoke dragon breath alone was enough to kill a law-defying wizard like him. The Winter Castle was right in front of him, and the huge temple that stood in the center of the city could be seen clearly. Grimm did not dare to hesitate. As soon as his body reformed, he quickly sprinted towards his target in the distance. Whether he could escape from this terrifying god of death, it all depended on this. The path of fire left behind by Grimm was not damaged at all by Sinclair. Flapping her colorful dragon wings and wrapped in a blazing red fire cloud, this rank 6 female dragon flew across the sky like a peerless god of death, closely following behind Grimm. As if sensing the arrival of the 2 experts, many surging violent auras soared into the sky from within the huge temple. After that, 4 strange figures of different heights appeared in front of the hall. The one in the middle of the 4 figures was a skinny old man who looked like he was about to die. He was wearing a multicolored Magisprius cloak, and his face, body, and hands were painted with strange patterns, which were made of bright germanium clay. Strange feathers were stuck on his head, and he was holding a long-handled magic wand, which was made from panly wood, in his left hand. Behind him stood 3 familiar-looking orc powerhouses. They were the 3 god-tier orcs who went to Damodor to cause trouble. The old orc wand in his hand trembled, and a golden halo appeared. He shouted in a hoarse and deep voice that was filled with supreme majesty. "This is the main temple of the great beast god in the world. You Grimm and Shinkla speed was too fast. so fast that the beastmen didn't even receive any warning before they arrived at the main temple. Therefore, this orc officiant could only bring a few of his subordinates to stop Grim. But before he finished his sentence, the elderly orc sensed Sinclair's violent and domineering aura, and his face turned abnormally sullen. Chapter 1470. Seeing that the orcs were blocking his way, Grim attacked without hesitation. He did not hold back, and it was impossible for him to hold back. The people in front of him were all top-notch orcs, and he was now in the main temple of the beast god, Ash. Grim had no doubt that if they were given a few seconds, they would definitely be able to summon violent divine power from the distant beast god's divine kingdom and transform into invincible god-ranked orcs once again. Hence, he took advantage of the fact that the orcs had yet to figure out what was going on to push the disaster onto them. This was what a smart magus should do. For the first time, Grim brought out his most berserk and ferocious side without holding back. The Vulcan orb in his heart seemed to have torn open a spatial tunnel leading to the depths of the fire elemental plane. Berserk fire energy was pumped into his limbs and bones with every beat of his heart. The fire energy in Grim's body rose by 3 levels, turning from scarlet to deep red, then from deep red to dark red, before finally becoming transparent. He did not cast any fire spells, and instead turned the flames into a surging torrent that shot towards the orcs in front of him. The extremely high temperature of the flames instantly turned everything within a kilometer into a Vulcan furnace. All life and matter that was exposed to the flames were reduced to basic particles by the berserk fire particles. All life within the range of the flames quickly disappeared one after the other. Even the beastmen powerhouses' expressions changed, and they hurriedly released violent energy from within their bodies to protect themselves. At least 2 of the 5 orc powerhouses could crush Grim with their basic strength. But in this situation where they were caught off guard and met someone who did not play by the rules, no matter how powerful they would be defeated and left in a sorry state. Although Grim's attacks were extremely ferocious, they were only difficult to deal with for these orcs who were already at the peak of the plane, and they were not fatal. However, this kind of attack was like a calamity to the ordinary orcs near the temple. The berserk flames wreaked havoc, and the orc worshippers who could not escape in time were instantly turned to ashes. Even though there were a few powerful orcs who could withstand the flames and escape, they did not manage to escape more than a kilometer before they were turned into human torches. In an instant, the orcs within a kilometer of the orc god's main temple suffered heavy casualties. Many buildings started to melt under the berserk flames before distorting and collapsing. "How dare you? You're courting death!" All sorts of angry shouts and curses with different accents resounded. The 5 orc experts, including the divine temple chief Ablatum, all burst forth with their strongest power and attacked this hateful enemy who didn't know life from death. At the same time, the Tier 6 evil dragon Sinclair, who was now within a kilometer of Grim, opened its maw and spat another black dragon breath at the infuriating bastard. 2 ferocious attacks came from the front and back, leaving no room for Grim to dodge or escape. However, not only did Grim not show the slightest fear in the face of death, he even revealed a cunning smile on his face. He even had the time to wave his hand at everyone, and his body suddenly exploded. Flame image. 3 miles away from Winter Castle, Grim and Cinca passed through the area one after the other, and the heavenly fire and draconic might they unleashed killed all the orcs along the way. At the center of a blazing sea of flames, a strange mental fluctuation suddenly spread out. Then, the flames shrank and converged, forming a 2-meter-tall humanoid creature. The flames on the surface of the flaming humanoid quickly solidified, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a tall man wearing a tight-fitting leather suit and a dark purple robe. The man stood up and raised his hood slightly. When he looked at Winter Castle, that was when the earth-shattering attack erupted. The 2 violent attacks that far surpassed the limits of this plane collided, instantly tearing apart the plane's barrier. The entire Winter Castle, along with the main temple of the orc god, was engulfed in a violent energy vortex. At the same time, Grim could even hear the furious roars of the orc experts in the distance. Visible to the naked eye, a berserk ripple of power rushed out of the city. Wherever it passed, the beastmen were instantly vaporized, and the beastmen's buildings, which had always been known for their sturdiness, were destroyed beyond recognition. Grim did not know what happened in the distance. He only knew that the city wall he was facing was crushed like a piece of cheese by the wave of energy, turning into a pile of debris that was thrown far away. At the point of the explosion, a condensed and powerful will suddenly shifted over and locked onto Grim's position again. It was still Cinca. Using the flame mirror image, Grim moved his body away from the battlefield, leaving only a flame doppelganger behind. However, the distance was not far enough, and he was not out of the range of the evil little female dragon's mental perception. Therefore, after the attack, the little female dragon sensed that something was wrong and once again searched for Grim's traces. Grim knew that he had been exposed, so he did not dare to stay any longer. He turned around and ran away from the direction of Winter Castle. The main temple of the beast deity Ashi had been blown up. Although he did not know the extent of the damage, even if it was just a brick, it was still a great insult to the high and mighty beast deity, Ashi. If he could tolerate this, he would not be worthy to call himself the beast deity faction's deity faction. As expected, when the main temple of the beast deity was attacked by the aftermath of the explosion, the towering statue of the beast deity within the temple that was at least 100 meters tall suddenly emitted a bright golden light. As the radiance flowed, the 100-meter-tall statue's appearance changed rapidly. He had a rough face, a wide mouth full of fangs, wearing a heavy and crude black full-body armor, and carrying a huge double-sided axe on his back. It was the god of massacre from the beast god's faction, Garanicadus. As soon as this god of massacre arrived, before he could completely adapt to this slightly fragile body, he sensed the overwhelming number of believers wailing outside the temple. Those who could establish a foothold in Winter Castle and pray day and night near the main temple were all devout believers of the beast deity faction. Now, they were brutally attacked by the enemy. In an instant, tens of thousands of beast deity believers became pitiful souls. Under the torrent of their emotions of grief and despair, even this level 7 god of massacre felt a little sad. Garen's fierce face showed a hint of ferocity. He pulled out the huge double-sided axe from his back and walked out of the beast deity temple with footsteps that shook the mountains. Sinclair, I think you're looking for death. How dare you come to Lord Ashi's temple and cause trouble? I think you'll stay here. As soon as he stepped out of the temple, Garen's fierce gaze locked onto the huge dragon that was quickly escaping out of the city. As he spoke harshly, he raised the huge double-sided axe, leaned back slightly, and then suddenly threw it out with all his strength. The huge double-sided axe instantly turned into a golden light and smashed toward Sinclair. At this moment, how could Sinclair not know that he had fallen into the cunning sorcerer's trap? Although he was rash, he was not stupid. As a level 7 god, the reason why he could appear inside the plane was because he relied on the support of the main temple's enormous power of faith, which was able to isolate the suppression of the plane's power. Once he was far away from the main temple, it would be impossible for Garen to move freely and attack as he wished. Therefore, Sinclair, who knew the strengths and weaknesses of these gods very well, did not hesitate to turn around and flee in the direction of the main god's temple the moment he sensed the violent aura of the slaughtering god Garen. However, as a level 7 god, the power and methods he possessed were not something a level 6 evil dragon could completely control. Before Sinclair could escape, a golden light instantly caught up to her flying figure and hit her right wing. Roar! With a deafening roar of the dragon, Sinclair's entire right wing was turned into flesh and blood, exploding into a bloody mist that filled the sky. However, she did not even dare to look back and continued to struggle to fly into the distance. As soon as Garen opened his hand, he grabbed the double-sided axe that was flying back to him. Then he took heavy steps that could shake the earth and the mountains, and instantly crossed a distance of more than 10 miles. He chased after the disheveled figure that was flapping its single wing crazily. As the powerhouses left one after another, the ravaged Winter Fort city finally calmed down again. However, Grimm's explosion of flames first, and then the terrifying collision of the joint attack. 2 consecutive explosions of level power had overwhelmed Winter Fort city, and it was on the verge of death. With a crisp crash, the rubble and gravel fell from the ruins. The orc sword master shook off the dust on his body and climbed out of the deep pit with great difficulty. At the same time, the few orc powerhouses who were swept far away by the shockwave of energy rushed back one after another. The 5 orc powerhouses were more or less entangled by Sinclair's strange black smoke. Even with their strength, it would take them a lot of time and energy to get rid of this strange rule power. In this way, it could be said that they had suffered heavy losses. However, what made them most furious were the orcs who died in Winterfort. Due to the terrifying power of the invading powerhouses from the other world, the city lost more than 30,000 orcs, which was almost half of the population of Winterfort City. The number of elite orcs lost this time was so high that the powerhouses could not help but cry when they heard about it. Investigate. Immediately find out who the sorcerer who lured the evil dragon Sinclair to Winterfort City is. The next time we fight, we'll tear that bastard into pieces. Chapter 1471. The massacre god only chased for 100 miles before stopping. He could only scream at Sinclair's disappearing figure, but there was nothing he could do. Sinclair chased Grimm for another 10,000 miles before stopping near a mountain peak. She cursed at him from afar before flying back to the dragon's tomb. On the mountain peak, Grimm had just reformed his body when the great wizard Fong, Li's shapeless body, appeared in front of him. Behind him were the Bao family, Catherine, and Tun Kai. They had obviously just arrived as well. The moment they appeared, a cold gaze swept past Grimm and landed on the evil little female dragon Sinclair in the distance. If Sinclair was in her perfect form, she would not hesitate to attack Fong, Li, Grimm, and the other 3 level 5 wizards, even though the plane of existence had severely suppressed her strength. Whether she could defeat them or not, she would have to fight them first. To be honest, in the eyes of the evil little female dragon Sinclair, these so-called human wizards were all cowards. She would not even care if one of them was at the same level as her. Unfortunately, her body had already been gravely injured by the Tier 7 god of massacre, and she urgently needed to be healed. If he were to engage in a battle with a few human magi at this time, the consequences would be hard to predict. Therefore, facing the aggressive human wizards, Sinclair could only admit defeat, which was rare for him. He turned around and left the battlefield. Seeing the evil dragon's figure disappear into the distance, the great wizard Fong Li secretly sighed in relief. He then turned his gaze to Grimm, who was in a slightly disheveled state. He did not say anything for a long time. Attacking the orcs' main city alone. Even the level 6 great wizard Fong Li did not dare to think of such a thing, but Grimm actually dared to do it. Newborn calves were not afraid of tigers. If the orcs' main city was so easy to deal with, the great wizard Fong Li would not have waited until now. There was a large number of beastmen experts guarding the area. However, this was not the worst part. The most terrifying thing was the main orc god temple. This meant that the orc gods could descend from their divine kingdom at any time. Wizards like them had a good chance of winning against 1 or 2 god clones. However, if one were to directly confront a true god in the main shrine of a true god, no matter how many lives one had, it wouldn't be enough to bury one's grave. Therefore, the basic process for wizards to conquer the plane of faith was to cut off the periphery and use plagues, curses, and other methods to reduce the number of believers on a large scale. When the other side's temple lost the blessing of the power of faith, they would attack and completely destroy it. After all, the gods that most of the faith planes worshipped were not native to this plane. However, if they wanted to cross the endless sea of stars and descend their power, They would need the support and guidance of the plane of faith. If most of the believers died, the foundation of faith would no longer exist, and those gods would only waste the power of their own god kingdom for nothing. This was something no god would do. On the other hand, the sorcerer faction had only just entered the first stage of the process. They were still at the stage of establishing an outpost camp and establishing a firm foothold. Attacking the enemy's main city and main shrine without even shaking the enemy's foundation of faith was no different from courting death. Hence, looking at Grimm, who was still alive and kicking in front of him, even the great Magus Fonley could not help but sigh at his good luck. Go back. Don't mess around in this plane anymore. We're all here to carry out a mission, so there's no need to work too hard and put yourself in unnecessary danger. In the days to come, you'd better be more obedient. Sighing once again, the great Magus Fonley threw these words at him and turned to return to Damodar City. The other great magi all looked at Grimm with strange gazes and turned to leave as well. Grimm smiled awkwardly and could only follow them back to the camp with a face full of dirt. After returning to Damodar City, Grimm was temporarily grounded. In fact, even without the great Magus Fonley's orders, Grimm did not plan to take even half a step out of Damodar City. Who knew if that Tier 6 female dragon had already left the Gale Plane? If that vengeful fellow was still guarding outside the camp, Grimm would really be seeking his own death if he went out again. Moreover, it was not like Grimm did not gain anything from this trip. In the ancient dragon's tomb, when Grimm ordered the Magi to retreat, he also brought back the Dragon Lich. Originally, when Grimm gave this order, he had the intention of diverting the trouble to someone else. If Sinclair went to chase after the wyverns, he could easily escape. However, out of his expectations, the evil female dragon actually locked onto him and chased him to the ends of the earth. He could only take the risk and bring her to the orcs. However, this was not a bad thing. At least he had obtained a peak rank for Dragon Lich, so the risk this time was worth it. After returning to Damodar City, Grimm began to make his move on the Dragon Lich. This was a secret witchcraft room deep underground. It was dark, damp, and cold. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered in glowing green runes and magic lines. Dark and profound Magus energy flowed inside, forming a magic prison that was almost completely sealed. The Dracolic, which resembled a walking lizard, had its limbs pierced through by the golden fire chains and was firmly fixed in midair. The golden fire chains were scorching hot, and the Dragon Lich's pitch black, hard bones crackled from the heat. Meanwhile, the strange, inextinguishable flames seeped into its soul, burning it to the brink of death. It was excruciatingly painful. As an undead dragon, the Dragon Lich did not feel any pain. However, the inextinguishable flame had the characteristic of laws that could directly penetrate the soul. This pain did not come from the outside, from the flesh to the inside of the soul. Instead, it was directly etched into the depths of the soul by the power of laws. Therefore, even with the Dragon Lich's immortal body and magic resistance, it could not bear the torture of laws. I really didn't expect that you're a devout follower of Sinclair. Grimm paced slowly in the secret room, completely ignoring the Dragon Lich's twisted body in pain. Tell me, how did you get in touch with her? I don't believe that the dragons would let Sinclair tarnish the dignity of the dragons. Grimm's words were not without reason. The dragons had always valued oaths and dignity. They hated people who went against the laws of life and turned the remains of their own kind into undead creatures. Hence, the Dragon Clan wouldn't allow an evil dragon to control the ancient dragon tomb as it pleased, regardless of whether it was for public or private reasons. Either the dragon race had given up on this dragon's mausoleum, or some big shot of the dragon race had concealed the information inside. As a magus, Grimm could smell the scent of schemes and schemes. Human magus, you'd better let me go as soon as possible. Otherwise, when Lord Sinclair finds this place, you'll be devoured in one bite. The Dragon Lich was quite stubborn. Even after being tortured by the inextinguishable flames, it did not relent. You're still waiting for Sinclair to save you? He. Grim could not help but laugh coldly. If you knew that Sinclair could not even protect himself, and even had one of his wings broken, you wouldn't be so stubborn. Wulsh asterisk T, that's impossible. There's no one in this realm who can threaten the great Lord Sinclair. You're spouting nonsense. The dragon lich's green eyes showed a hint of disdain. It was obvious that it did not believe Grim's words. Grim did not waste any more time with it. He raised his hand and summoned a magic mirror in front of him. The light and shadow on the surface of the mirror changed, and the scene in Winterfort City was displayed. The Dracolica's face turned ghastly pale as he watched the indomitable, ferocious, and terrifying orc god shatter Sinclair's dragon wings with a single blow. It wanted to say that this scene was fake, but through the magic mirror, the Tier 6 evil dragon Sinclair's anxious and furious mental fluctuations were so clear and real. As an evil dragon worshipper, the dragon lich could not refute that. You're right. There's indeed no one in this realm who can threaten Sinclair. But don't forget, there's still the god. I tricked her into coming to the orc main city with a little trick and made her fight with the orc god. Sinclair is heavily injured now. Do you think she'll be able to save you? Grim did not hold back as he attacked the dragon lich's mental defenses. The special secret room could indeed isolate the path of faith in the dragon lich's soul, but it was impossible for Grim to forcefully enslave it without breaking through its mental defenses. Of course, it would be a different story if Lich Congness was here. When it came to playing with souls, the liches were the true experts. The dragon lich lowered its head and did not speak again. Its soul was as strong as ever, evidently unaffected by Grim's words. Grim didn't mind at all. As a great wizard, he had plenty of time to play with the dragon lich. There was no rush. Grim snorted. Since that's the case, you can stay here for a few more years. When you've thought it through, we'll find a chance to talk. With that, Grim turned around and left the secret room. Meanwhile, the golden fire chains that were tightly binding the dragon lich were instantly ignited with endless flames, and shrill cries of pain rang out in the secret chamber. Grim came out of the interrogation room and turned around to enter the room next door. Chapter 1472. Mutated Scale Fruit. It was a type of Earth-type magic fruit. It could absorb Earth origin force from the surroundings to supply its own growth needs. Long-term consumption of the ripened fruit could improve one's physique, but it also had severe side effects, such as the growth of strange scales on one's body and the suppression of one's intelligence. The seed of the mutated scale fruit was evidently one of the high-grade magic ingredients found on the body of a powerful orc that the Magi had killed. With such magical properties, the mutated scale fruit already possessed traces of the aura of laws. So far, the sorcerers had invaded hundreds of orc plains and found many similar rare fruits in them. However, this was the first one that had reached the level of laws. Even in the Magus world, the seed of such a rare fruit would be classified as a high-grade strategic resource. As a great Magus, this was the first time Grim had seen one, which showed just how rare and precious it was. It could even be a treasure that a powerful orc had found by accident and hidden away to improve one's physique. However, fate was full of misfortune. This fellow had not even been able to protect his own life on the planar battlefield, allowing the fruit to fall into the hands of a grade 3 Magus, which then ended up in Grim's hands. Thinking of this, Grim could not help but sigh at the wonders of fate. However, even though the mutated scale fruit was effective, the serious side effects were also enough to make people shrink back. First of all, it needed dense earth elemental energy to grow. If it only relied on natural earth origin force, its growth would be extremely slow. The orcs might not be able to solve this problem, so they could only try their best to grow it on fertile soil. However, if it was Grim, the first thing he would think of was an earth elemental altar. A standard miniature earth elemental altar cost around 150,000 magic crystals, and it could continuously draw the purest and most refined earth elemental energy from the earth elemental plane to support the growth of the mutated scale fruit. This way, The growth of the mutated scale fruit would definitely speed up, and the production would increase. Secondly, after eating the mutated scale fruit, the body would accumulate earth elemental residues, which would then grow strange scales. This was not a big problem for Grimm. He could always improve his physique in the future. What really troubled him was the terrifying side effect of suppressing the development of his intelligence. No wonder there weren't many elemental spellcasters in the orc plane. After eating this kind of thing, their intelligence dropped drastically. It would be strange if they could still use magic. Therefore, Grimm had to find a way to mix up the ingredients of the mutated scale fruit and remove the harmful substances. This required a lot of time and effort, and this was obviously not possible on the battlefield. After asking the AI chip to set up a long-term research project, Grimm put the matter of the mutated scale fruit to the back of his mind and began to think about his own path of strengthening. Once they reached rank 5, the path of a law-defying wizard would be reflected in their control of the power of law. Using the flame rule that he controlled to extrapolate and extend upwards, he would then be able to control a higher and deeper level of the flame rule, thereby converging it into his own unique flame rule power. The last point was especially important. In a battle between law-defying wizards, the suppression of laws was very important. Whoever controlled the more powerful rule power and the higher the level of the rule power they controlled would be able to form a powerful regional effect similar to planar suppression during battle. This ability was called a domain by Magi. Within the domain formed from the power of one's own laws, one could create a space that was most suitable for one's abilities and suppress the opponent's laws. This was the case with Grimm's meticulously created Burning Domain. However, the Burning Domain used an area of effect fire spell to support a large space of flames. It had not reached the level of a true domain of laws, so it could be easily destroyed in a battle against someone of the same rank. Hence, Grimm almost never used the Burning Domain against someone of the same rank. He would only use it to clear the field when facing a large number of low-ranked enemies. Up until now, Grimm had only grasped the inextinguishable flame and the flame mirror image, two low-ranked laws of fire. To condense the flame rule power and deduce the most suitable domain of laws for himself. This was an extremely long and arduous task. However, Grimm's lifespan had already reached 10,000 years. There was no need to rush this. As long as he slowly accumulated his knowledge, there would be a day when he would condense his own unique flame rule power, gathering resources, gathering knowledge, and completing all sorts of necessary experiments and magical research. This would become the main theme of his long life, one that would run through him from start to finish. Since he could not condense the law of fire in a short period of time, the only things that could quickly increase his strength were fire spells and magic puppets. Ever since Grimm had become a rank 5 magus, the AI chip's abilities had undergone earth-shattering changes. His data processing, storage, and analysis abilities had all greatly improved, and he could help Grimm grow in all aspects. At this moment, in Grimm's mind, there are currently 4 rank 5 fire spells being analyzed and modeled. Once this was completed, Grimm would no longer be like before, only able to control the primitive form of fire energy to attack his enemies. This was not to say that the primitive form of fire energy was not good, but that the attack form was too simple. It was unable to form complex and varied spells, and could easily be destroyed by enemies. Moreover, if the primitive form of fire energy wanted to attack his enemies, Grimm would need to continuously lock onto it and guide it with his consciousness. During this period, his own defense would be at a lower level, and it would be easy for his spell casting to be interrupted to cause the flames to rebound. These were the flaws of directly controlling low-level magic energy. If he wanted to play to his strengths and avoid his weaknesses, he would have to form the primitive form of fire energy into a more powerful and varied fire spell. The power of laws was the source of power for Magi, who comprehended laws, and spells that were compatible with the power of laws were the weapons that Magi, who comprehended laws, could use to their fullest potential. The two complemented each other, and neither was dispensable. Methods that relied on modifying low-rank spells of the past to deduce high-rank spells were already outdated. After transforming from elemental spells to laws, the source of spells had undergone a qualitative change. They could only be explored and reconstructed from scratch. Flame Ignition, a rank 5 guided fire spell. Using his eyes, Grimm can infuse the power of fire into his opponent's body, igniting the magic energy within them. Every point of magic energy causes 5 points of fire damage. Flame Advent, a rank 5 summoning spell, able to summon a powerful army of fire from another plane. Its effects are 10 times that of a low-rank Flame Gate. Flame Refraction, a rank 5 attack type fire spell, summons a ball of fire and refracts the energy between multiple enemies. Every refraction increases the damage by 1,000 points. Can only be refracted 10 times. Initial damage is 6,000 points. Flame Barrier, a rank 5 defensive fire spell. Using the law of fire to form a defensive barrier, it can resist all active and passive magic attacks. Base defense is 20,000 points. If these 4 spells of law were to take form, along with the rank 5 divine spell Scorched Earth in the Vulcan Orb and the rank 5 poison spell Ring of Decay from the Book of Filth. At the same time, Grimm would have 6 spells that covered summoning, attack, and defense. This way, he would have a huge advantage in a battle of the same rank. However, according to the AI chip's calculations, it would take another 2 to 3 years for the 4 spells of law to take form. During this period, he could only rely on the rank 4 spells that had the law of fire mixed in. As for the rank 5 mid-grade magic beast that he had given to Magus Sharon in the Mountainine Plain, it would probably take a few years to complete. As for creating his own rank 5 magic puppet, that would require a large amount of rank 5 magic materials. With the rarity and price of rank 5 magic materials, even Grimm would find it difficult to obtain them in bulk. If not for the fact that he had gained a huge advantage during the Magus Worlds Planar War, he might not even have been able to obtain rank 5 materials. There was no hope for a magic puppet for now, and the spells of law still needed time to take form. Hence, Grimm could only be more well-behaved during this period of time. This was to prevent his enemies from catching him off guard when he was lacking in strength. The 3 months of the mission ended very quickly. Apart from the battle that had erupted when he first arrived, the entire mission period was so peaceful that it made people suspicious. Grimm only found out later that he had caused a lot of trouble for the orc powerhouses in Winter Castle. The strange attack from the rank 6 evil dragon, Sinclair, was not so easy to deal with. At that time, 2 of the 4 orc powerhouses present were entangled by the strange power of laws in the black smoke, and it took them a great deal of effort to completely disperse it afterwards. Even though they managed to dispel it, they had also suffered a great deal of damage. Because of this, the orcs' strength had weakened, and they did not dare to cause trouble in Damodar City anymore. That was how Grimm and the others managed to get through the second half of the 3-month mission safely. With the establishment of the first wizard tower in Damodar City, the city had become a solid fortress for the wizard faction to invade the Gular Plain. Now, even without the great wizard overseeing it, it was impossible for the indigenous orcs to chase the wizards out of the plain. With this wizard tower, an endless stream of wizard reinforcements could be teleported into the Gular Plain and then slowly invade and fight for the land and resources here. The subsequent planar wars were long and intense, often spanning years or even decades. In between, there might even be various twists and turns. However, this had nothing to do with Grimm. After all, he was only here to complete a so-called Great Wizard mission. Chapter 1473. Fire Elemental Dimension, Molten Altar. A giant teleportation portal shrouded in a dark red glow suddenly opened in the air. It was obvious that the void teleportation portal was not stable. The ripples of space on the light gate formed by the fire element were so clear that one could feel the vibrations from 100 miles away. After a long while, the void teleportation portal barely stabilized. Grimm dragged the dragon Lich captive through the light gate and returned to the molten altar. Welcome back, Master. Sensing the ripples of space, the mother of dark web spiders, Laspis, and the clone brain, Sock, hurried to the light gate and greeted Grim. Take care of this bastard. Don't let him escape. Grim threw the dragon lich captive to the mother of dark web spiders and steadied himself. He began to carefully examine the molten altar before him. At this moment, the molten altar had become a giant construction site. Thousands of engineering magical machines were busy near the lava lake, moving rocks, magical materials, magical alloys, and other resources. Even more creatures native to the fire elemental dimension were used as laborers to flatten the ground, using volcanic rocks to build a temporary path to the center of the lava lake. A giant metal furnace was erected by the side of the lava lake. The thick black smoke coming out of the vent almost covered the entire valley of the molten altar. Magical iron ores from the camps outside the region were thrown into the furnace, then crushed, stirred, filtered, tempered, purified, and turned into magical iron alloys that could be used in the construction of the wizard's pagoda. Metal pillars that were 3 meters thick and 20 meters long were piled up by the side of the lake, waiting to be tossed into the lake to be used as the base of the wizard's pagoda after the magical patterns and runic spell formations were drawn. As the location of the wizard's pagoda could not be revealed, these detailed tasks could only be completed by higher-level, more intelligent wizard puppets. Thus, the progress of the construction was not too fast. According to the current speed, it would take more than 20 years for the wizard's pagoda to be completely completed. This speed was like the speed of a turtle compared to the Silver Alliance, but for safety's sake, this was the only way. After all, the Silver Alliance had a large number of arcane magi, and the stones, magical materials, and runic spell formations they used were all semi-finished products that had been prepared beforehand. All they needed to do was to assemble these items at the base of the tower and fuse them into a whole. If Grim wanted to build the wizard's pagoda, he would have to carve the magical symbols and wizard formations on every stone and door. With the scale of the wizard's pagoda he had envisioned, the workload would be so great that it would drive someone crazy. To be honest, if Split-Brain Sock could not multitask and control a dozen wizard puppets at the same time to draw the wizard formation, the time needed to build the tower would have been much longer. Grim slowly scanned the entire construction site and grasped the general situation. Seeing that everything was going according to plan, he nodded in satisfaction. How is it? Is the project going well? If you have any problems, just tell me. Since I'm here, I'll solve them for you. Hearing Grim's question, Sock forced a smile and said, Master, the temperature of the lava lake is too high. Ordinary engineering equipment will melt immediately. Even the special fire-resistant magical equipment wouldn't be able to last long in there. That's why the construction site is in desperate need of a group of big guys that can move freely in the lava lake. Oh, Grim focused and thought for a moment. In the fire elemental dimension, only the molten core giants fit Sock's description. The others were either too powerful or too few in number. Grim quickly turned to the mother of dark web spiders, asking in a low voice, Are there any tribes of molten core giants nearby? It's best if they have between 200 to 500 members. As for their strength, level 2 should be enough. The mother of dark web spiders thought for a moment, then said softly, I remember that there's a tribe of molten core giants about 7 days southeast from here. There are about 400 of them, and their leader is a level 3 magician. Yes, that's it then. Find someone to lead the way for me. I'll be right back. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Grim set off with a level 2 elite dark web spider. Half a month later, Grim returned to the valley with a group of 400 molten core giants. It could be seen that the molten core giants came in different sizes, with adults and juveniles. They should be a relatively complete tribe. It was a pity that the Type 3 molten core giant's 11-meter-tall body was a little crooked, and there were obvious traces of external force on it, as if it had been forcefully disassembled and pieced back together. The energy aura it exuded was almost at the level of a Grade 2 giant. Sock, this is the helper I found for you. It's called Nasta, and it'll be responsible for building the tower in the lava lake from now on. You have to hurry up and make sure they don't slack off and finish the job as soon as possible. Grimm assigned the group of molten core giants to Sock as soon as he returned. Cross-brained Sock looked at the big guys behind Grimm and immediately smiled. The stone used to build the wizard's pagoda was 3 to 5 square meters and weighed several tons. Normal fire creatures or engineering magical machinery could not move it, not to mention that they had to build piles and reinforce the foundation of the tower at the bottom of the lava lake that was 50 to 60 meters deep. It was impossible to carry out this kind of work in this kind of environment without a decent helper. Now that they had the molten core giants, everything could proceed smoothly according to plan. Of course, when Grimm was not paying attention, Cross-brained Sock secretly dragged the level 3 molten core giant leader Nasta to the side and curiously asked about the process of recruiting it. Nasta almost wept bitterly as he recounted the painful past of how the Lord transformed into a 100-meter-tall flame giant and beat up all the molten core giant warriors on the ground. As the leader of the molten core giants, Nasta resisted even more fiercely, which made the Lord so angry that he tore Nasta's body apart. If not for the fact that Nasta still had some brains and surrendered early on, the Lord might have instantly destroyed the entire molten core tribe in a fit of anger. Actually, this was the advantage of the flame creatures. Although they were usually violent and tyrannical, once they surrendered, they would become loyal and would never rebel. If they were not willing to accept your rule, they would only challenge you face to face and decide their fate by winning or losing. They would never play any tricks behind your back, nor would they pretend to be obedient but oppose you in secret. Therefore, even though Grimm's act of kidnapping and robbing the molten core giants was very rough, and he did not promise them any material benefits. However, the moment the molten core giants lowered their heads, they had already become Grimm's most loyal and resolute subordinates. In the fire elemental plane, whoever had the biggest fist was the king. This was the creed of power etched in the souls of all fire elemental creatures. Simple, violent, but with a hint of cuteness, the arrival of the molten core giants added hundreds of towering giants to the construction site. The molten core giant's body was not made of pure foreign flames like other flame creatures. Instead, its body was made of huge pieces of molten rock, and inside it flowed crimson magma with a temperature of nearly 1,000 degrees. Their special structure allowed them to have a strong body and violent strength that other low-level flame creatures did not have. It was perfect to use them as laborers. All the molten core giants carried the thick metal pillars and walked into the lava lake step by step. Soon, their bodies were engulfed by the dark red, sticky, and terrifying lava. In such a harsh environment, other magic creatures and engineering magic machines made of high-resistance magic alloys could not work normally. However, they moved freely like fish in water. Not only did they not get burned by the lava, but they also became more energetic. At the bottom of the lava lake, where the temperature was almost 2,000 degrees Celsius, the molten giants were stepping on the soft, molten rocks and thrusting metal pillars that were engraved with magic runes and spell formations into the depths of the rocks one after another. Strangely enough, the magic veins on the surface of these inconspicuous metal pillars lit up as soon as they came into contact with the boiling lava. An invisible magical force field spread out, pushing the surrounding liquid lava further away. When the 128 metal pillars were in place in a ring, the magic force field that they gathered took shape, opening up an empty space with a radius of nearly a kilometer in the middle of the lava lake. As soon as the cavity appeared, the engineering magic machines that had been waiting for a long time swarmed in and started working like a swarm of ants. With Grimm's current status as a great wizard, he would not use the cheap volcanic rock to build his private wizard pagoda. The stones piled up like a small hill by the lava lake were not ordinary. They were fire crystals, which were rare even in the fire elemental plane. In the fire elemental plane, fire crystals were equivalent to magical crystals in the wizard world. They were a valuable, high-end item, but now they had become the base for Grimm to build his own wizard pagoda. Piece by piece, The fire crystals were thrown into the empty space of the lava lake. The engineering magic machines were busy piling them up according to specific locations and shapes. As they built the pagoda, they also carved complicated and mysterious magical lines and wizard runes on the base of the pagoda. Strengthening runes, defense spell formations, energy nodes, energy conduction, control spell formations, magical circuits. Every fire crystal was a small magical circuit, as well as a small energy node. When they were linked together, they formed a runic spell formation that was getting larger and larger, etching the rune lines into the grooves, filling them with magical mithril, which had the best magical conductivity, and embedding magical gems with different functions at the key points. Only the tireless engineering magic machines and fire elemental creatures could do such a complicated job. Chapter 1474. The Fire Elemental Plane, near the Molten Altar. This was a dark red cloud floating high in the sky. A strange old man stood quietly within the cloud. He wore a black tuxedo, well-ironed trousers, and a pair of spotless leather boots. Although the white hair on his head looked old, it was still combed neatly. He did not use any flying equipment, and there were no signs of casting spells on him. He just stood quietly in the red cloud, slightly bending his body as he silently observed everything that was happening in the valley of the Molten Altar. From his appearance, he seemed to be an ordinary old man, and there was nothing strange about him. However, given the harsh environment of the fire elemental plane, if he was really an ordinary person, how could he survive here and even hide from Grimm's spiritual senses to spy on the Molten Altar at such a close distance? The old man seemed to have been hiding in the red cloud for a long time, examining almost every special person and place in the construction site several times. He was especially interested in the sub-brain sock, as well as the small teleportation formation that connected to the Outlands camp, the Steel Capital. Of course, the moment Grimm appeared, the old man withdrew his gaze and only used his passive senses to silently observe his every move. After confirming Grimm's true rank countless times, the old man took out an old-fashioned pocket watch from his shirt pocket. He held in his hand for a few moments before carefully putting it back. The pocket watch was not big, and it was golden in color. It seemed to be made of brass. However, when the old man stroked the watch with his finger, an abnormally powerful, yet strange fluctuation of laws slowly spread. If the old man's ability to hide was too great, it would be understandable that Grimm did not notice him. But now, such an obvious fluctuation of laws spread out like a ripple in the blink of an eye, and Grimm really did not deserve to be called a great wizard if he still could not discover it. Somewhere in the valley, Grimm was discussing with the mother of Macrocosm about capturing more powerful slaves to form a flame core that could protect the entire molten fire territory. Suddenly, Grimm raised his head, his eyes filled with astonishment that could not be concealed. Beep! Detected fluctuations of the law of time. Searching for the source of the fluctuations, time law. Grimm was shocked. This was one of the most enviable laws in the planar world. Along with the space law, it was one of the two most powerful planar laws. However, these two abilities were very difficult to master. One had to have extremely powerful innate talent to be able to learn them. Therefore, among all the magi Grimm had met so far, there was no one who possessed these two laws, except for Alice. Now that he sensed the strange undulations in the fire elemental plane, Grimm's heart skipped a beat. He quickly scanned the surroundings to find the source of the undulations. Grimm stood still, his eyes emitting a faint blue fluorescence as he scanned the sky again and again. There, streaks of golden ripples spread out, silently touching the invisible, formless laws of the plane of existence. Although the collision of the laws was slight, there were traces left behind. Grimm's gaze quickly followed the traces of the laws, focusing on the thick red clouds floating above the valley. He increased the frequency of his gaze, instantly piercing through the red clouds and clearly seeing the old man standing in the middle. A human? No, that's not possible either. Others might not be able to see through the essence of the old man. But as a great magus with the help of the AI chip, Grimm could naturally see through the surface and see the source of the other party's power. In his eyes, the old man was a human-shaped body of laws, densely packed and intertwined with lines of power. His clothes, his flesh and blood, his bones, his skin, and even his heart that was beating vigorously in his body were all woven and intertwined by layers of impenetrable threads of power. Based on the energy radiated by the power threads, the old man's origin was the same as Grimm's, a fire element. This meant that he was a native of the fire elemental plane. However, apart from seeing through the old man's origin, Grimm also discovered 3 or 4 special energy halos around him. They were obviously powerful magic items. This was especially so for the right side of the old man's chest. There was an energy halo that he had never seen before, and it was the source of the fluctuations of laws. The fluctuations of laws of time were not his own ability, but a powerful magic item. Grimm could not help but heave a sigh of relief. "Since you're here, why don't you come down and have a seat?" Grimm said softly. The old man did not act pretentiously, and with a chuckle, he took a step forward and appeared in front of Grimm in the next moment. Grimm's expression did not change, but his heart was filled with shock. The heart of laws that had been pulsing with power suddenly stopped. 2,139 meters. There was a distance of 2,139 meters between where the old man had been standing and Grimm. However, he could not sense any traces of magic, abilities, or spells from the old man. He had crossed over 2,000 meters in an instant and appeared in front of him. If not for the AI chip's ability to see through the old man's existence, Grimm would have suspected that the old man was just an illusion without a physical body. Grimm did not recognize him, but the dragonweb spider queen beside him, Lachesis, recognized him. This usually fearless rank for Lord of the Flames immediately bowed when it saw the old man, calling out respectfully, "Lord Hegel." The old man tidied up his noble attire and glanced at Lachesis, saying indifferently, "Congratulations, Lachesis. I haven't seen you for a few days, but you actually have a master now." On the ugly and ferocious head of the dragon web spider queen, Lachbeth, the lotus petal-shaped mouth opened and closed a few times, but it could only sigh helplessly and lower its head. In the dark, Grimm had already communicated with Lachbeth. "Who is he?" "Hegel. Rank 5. Rank 6, a subordinate of the Sovereign of Flames, Zetas. Lord Zetas hasn't taken a step out of his palace for close to 10,000 years. Normally, the affairs of the territory are handled by this Lord Hegel, subordinate. Bullsh * T subordinate. This was a clone of laws of the Sovereign of Flames, all right?" Grimm screamed inwardly, but he could not blame Lachesis. After all, the other party did not have such a powerful X-ray scanning ability like him that could directly see through the source of Hegel's power. Hence, it was reasonable to treat him as a human subordinate of the Sovereign of Flames. Human? Why did the Sovereign of Flames create a clone of laws in human form? Could it be that Zetas had some sort of relationship with humans? Grimm guessed inwardly as he warmly welcomed Hegel. He could clearly sense that Hegel might only be a rank 5 clone, but his overall strength was above his own. If they really fought, Grimm would not be able to gain any advantage in the fire elemental plane. "So it's Lord Hegel. I wonder which gust of wind blew you here. Welcome, welcome. I haven't tidied up this place yet, so it's a little crude. Sorry for the embarrassment." Since he could not defeat Hegel in a fight, he would obediently give in. Grimm was very sensible. Hee, in the fire elemental plane, there's no need to pay so much attention to etiquette. It's not popular here. Let's just be straightforward and say what we have to say. Hegel said indifferently. "Yes, since that's the case, I won't hide it. May I know why Lord Hegel has come to the Molten Fire Altar?" "It's nothing special. I just heard from my subordinates that an unfamiliar powerhouse from another world has appeared here and is recruiting everywhere. That's why I'm here to take a look." "Then, what did you see, Lord?" "From the looks of it, you should be from the Magus civilization, right?" "Yes." May I know which plane you're from? The Magus world. Grimm hesitated for a moment, but still gave the answer. At their level, there were many things that could not be said carelessly, as it would often affect their future. The Magus world? The origin plane of the Magus civilization. You're so young, Lord. Looks like you're one of the most talented magi. Grimm could not figure out the other party's background, so he could only speak a few words of humility. You want to become one of the Flame Monarchs, right? Hegel suddenly asked. Grimm's breathing stopped for a moment, and his spiritual will instantly soared. He squinted his eyes, and the flames in his body began to come to life. The Book of Darkness condensed a protective barrier under his skin. If necessary, Grimm could instantly cover himself in layers of multi-purpose defensive spells. The Vulcan Orb Scorched Earth and the Book of Darkness Aura of Decay would definitely catch Grimm off guard. The moment they met, 2 level 5 attacks. Even if this elder's existence was extraordinary, it was impossible for him to defend against such ferocious attacks. After making all his preparations, Grimm smiled warmly. So what if I am? So what if I'm not? The atmosphere on the battlefield suddenly turned cold. If you don't want to become a Flame Monarch, then pretend I didn't say anything. If you do, I think we need to discuss some things in advance. Hegel's expression did not change, as if he did not care about Grimm's vigilance. Discuss what? Chapter 1475. A long time after Hegel had left, Grimm stood rooted to the ground, deep in thought. Under the command of the Broodmother, all the busy fire creatures avoided Grimm's position, not daring to disturb him. After a long while, Grimm broke free from his thoughts and returned to his normal state. He was surprised, but not too surprised. His arrival seemed to be within reason. However, it was unexpected for him to come so early. Becoming the sovereign king of flames? The method was actually very simple. Pull a large plane into a fire elemental plane and let it become a part of the fire elemental plane. That would be enough. However, Grimm clearly knew the true value of a large plane. The Magus world was a large-scale plane. Although it was older and had a higher level of power, it was still an indisputable large-scale plane. The arcane empire that Grimm had invaded and witnessed its destruction was also a large plane. It was so large that it had almost given birth to an arcane empire that could rival the Magus civilization. Even in the multiverse, where material planes were as numerous as the stars, there were only a few large planes. All of them were coveted and fought over by the universe's powerful races. With Grimm's current strength, invading a small plane was not a problem. However, it was extremely difficult to invade a middle-grade plane, and most of the time, it would end in failure. For example, the Lance plane, which had long since fallen into the hands of the Crimson family, was still being developed with great difficulty. If Zero Wing provoked a Tier 4 Dragon Lord, even the Steel City, with its frighteningly high defensive power, would suffer a miserable fate as the dragon stomped on it. Not to mention a large plane, even a medium-sized plane that was still in the process of being developed was enough to make the Crimson family's pockets bulge. In that case, the benefits of ruling a large plane alone, that was something that made people's hearts beat faster and their eyes red with envy. To become the sovereign king of a fire elemental plane and gain the recognition of the plane's consciousness, the simplest and most direct method was to pull a large plane over and assimilate it with the fire elemental plane. Such a simple and crude method left Grimm speechless. Wouldn't it be better for him to just be the king of the world? Why would he exchange a large plane for the title of king of the fire elemental plane? But thinking about it carefully, the world king of a large dimension might not be as powerful as a flame monarch of the fire elemental dimension. And this was decided by the level of the plane and the upper limit of power of both sides. When the 4 great elemental realms of earth, fire, water, and wind were combined together, they would form a gigantic material plane that was 2 levels higher than a large material plane. Moreover, the fire elemental plane was also a super large plane, 1 level higher than a large plane. Therefore, it was understandable that the flame's sovereign king status was more distinguished. However, No matter how noble the Flame Monarch was, Grimm felt that it was not worth it to exchange a large plane for it. However, if it wasn't a large dimension of his own, it might be worth considering sacrificing it to the fire elemental plane. Of course, Hegel didn't come all the way to the molten altar just to tell Grimm how to become the Flame Monarch, but also to mark the boundary. The Zeta's King's territory was 7,000 miles to the northeast of the molten altar. According to the agreement between Grimm and Hegel, before he became a king, his territory could not exceed 1,000 miles from the molten altar, and he could not have more than 3 grade for subordinates. If he broke the rules, the surrounding flame monarchs had the right to expel him from the fire elemental plane. Of course, the reason for this agreement was most likely because the flame monarchs wanted to protect the native creatures of the fire elemental plane. This was the only way to prevent the foreign powerhouses from wantonly hunting and plundering the wild high-grade flame monarchs. But this way, Grimm's plan to expand his influence in the fire elemental plane was somewhat dashed. On the contrary, he had to carefully plan the allocation of the 3 grade for subordinates. After thinking for a while, Grimm threw these troublesome matters to the back of his mind and focused on studying Hegel's strange ghost-like movement method. He had a feeling that Hegel's movement method did not rely on any items or spells, but was purely a technique to use the power of the rule. This was also the future direction that Grimm had not been able to enter. Grimm stood there silently, the chip replaying the image of Hegel in his mind over and over again. The playback speed was extremely slow, as if every minute movement of Hegel's was broken down into countless tiny rubbings, which were then studied in detail frame by frame. Apart from that, the AI chip also saw through the various minute changes in Hegel's body. Combining the two, Grimm finally found some clues. Laws. As a magus of laws, the source of power would always be above laws. When the AI chip slowed down Hegel's movements to the extreme, Grimm finally saw how the power of laws in Hegel's body, coupled with the laws of the outside world, merging his entire body into the plane's system and then breaking free from it at a specific location. Using the laws of the plane as a bridge for short-distance teleportation, this kind of teleportation method could ignore any magic shields or barriers. It could also ignore walls, earth, trees, rocks, and other obstacles. As long as the laws of the plane extended to a place, they could freely come and go as they pleased. The only thing that could stop this kind of teleportation was a barrier of laws or a protection of laws. But how many people in the plane could have such a high-end protection? If the Wizard Tower put up all its defenses and isolated all connections, it would be possible to stop the infiltration of laws. However, this state of isolation was also abnormally taxing on the Wizard's Pagoda. It would not be a problem to maintain it for 10 days to half a month, but the energy pool would be exhausted after a long time. When that happened, what would he use to stop the infiltration of laws? The more he analyzed and thought about it, the more Grimm felt that this technique of using laws was powerful. If he could use it in actual combat, then his enemies would be in deep trouble. Chip immediately create a new research topic. Deduce high-level usage of the law of fire, as well as the compatibility between the law of fire and the laws of the plane. Beep. Mission established. Deducing mission model requires gathering information on laws. Mission has been broken down. Host needs to complete experiments on laws before proceeding to the next step. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The AI chip in Grimm's mind projected a large amount of data. Numerous spell formulas and calculations fell from the top of the screen like an avalanche, piling up at the bottom of the screen. The pile grew taller and taller, as if it was going to drown the entire screen. Chip, there's no need to show me these intermediate processes in the future. Just show me the final result. Beep. Command accepted. In the next moment, the entire screen was cleared, leaving only 3 conditions flashing with green light. 1. Body of laws, 78% complete. 2. Condense the will of fire, 0% progress. 3. Complete experiment on the compatibility of laws, not started yet. Grimm's gaze slowly swept past the three conditions, thinking silently. Body of Laws was something he had been doing ever since he had become a Grade 5 Magus. However, he had always used the power of laws within the divine fire orb to radiate his body, allowing it to adapt to the strength of the laws of fire. Now, he wanted to completely transform his body into laws so that he could fuse with the laws. After completing the first step, Grimm already had the foundation to fuse with the system of laws. However, the second step, the will of fire, was essential. Without the control of the will of fire, it would be easy to fuse with the laws, but separating them would be a problem. After all, Grimm only wanted to borrow the system of laws and not give everything he had a Leyland. Without his own will, fusing with the laws would be more like being devoured by them. Hence, condensing the will of fire that surpassed the laws was the most important thing. However, how to condense the will of fire was an extremely vague problem. If Grimm wanted to research this, he would have to pay a visit to the old powerhouses of various planes or the old magi of his faction. He could not rush such a thing. He could only take it one step at a time and slowly explore. After all, with the 10,000 years of a Grade 5 Magus lifespan, there was still plenty of time for him to squander. As for the third condition, he could carry out some related experiments in advance. However, without completing the body of laws, it would be too risky to carry out such experiments. Hence, it seemed like he would have to hurry up with the body of laws. Just as Grimm was about to return to Boulder Castle after dealing with some matters in the fire elemental plane, the clone Brainsock received an interesting message. The message was sent from the Sorcerer World's internal plane, and the content of the message was very simple, just one sentence. The demigod Lich Kongness has returned to the corpse plane. It said that he's trying to break through to Grade 5. In truth, Grimm was not surprised to receive this message. In terms of talent and strength, the demigod Lich Kongness was not inferior to him in any aspect. This was especially true after he obtained the austere Winter's chest. His strength had improved by leaps and bounds, and he was improving by leaps and bounds. The reason he had only started to advance after such a long time was not because of his poor talent, but because of the special nature of a lich. Liches were undead creatures, typical undead creatures. They did not have flesh, bones, or meridians in their bodies, so they did not have life energy to nourish the soul. Under such circumstances, their advancement almost entirely depended on the transition of their souls. Perhaps the transition of the soul was not the most difficult part, but modifying a lich's phylactery so that it could accommodate a new soul. That was the most difficult part for a lich to advance. If the advancement failed and endangered a lich's phylactery, the demigod lich that stood proudly at the peak of the plane could be reduced to ashes in the next moment. Hence, the difficulty of advancing a lich was several times greater than that of a human magus. Chapter 1476. After returning to Giant Rock Castle, Grimm could clearly sense that the battle was intensifying. The atmosphere in the hall was extremely tense. The frequency at which the great magi were sent out was also increasing. White light flashed in every hall, and the spatial undulations never stopped. The great magi who returned from the outside world also suffered casualties. Even the two familiar faces in the flowery hall that Grimm was in never appeared again. Over 100 planes of faith had been conquered or destroyed in one go. Even a large divine organization like the Orc God would be furious and launch all sorts of counterattacks. The Orc divine organization had as many as 18 gods on the table. More than half of them had special domains such as massacre, war, conquest, strength, and destruction. The rest had special domains such as hunting, chaos, and tracking. This showed that the Orc gods were very good at fighting, and it was very difficult to deal with them. Although they were too rash and impulsive, and often fell into disorder because of their faction, they were still able to hold up the entire battlefield. However, their powerful individual battle prowess still held up the entire battlefield, putting the human wizards in extreme danger in the war against the orcs. The orc gods were powerful and dangerous, but they were not good at scheming or military strategy. However, they all charged forward bravely in battle and were incomparably valiant. What was most unbearable was that many of the orc gods were not afraid of death and would often choose to fight in their true forms in a moment of rage. This rarely happened in battles between the Magi faction and the other divine organizations in the world of gods. The orc divine system wasn't to be outdone in the face of the wizard camp's tide-like attacks, and they sent out small teams of orcs to charge into the secondary planes controlled by the wizards. Blood flowed like rivers in the secondary planes. They even used their own planes of faith as a foundation to repel the Magi's attacks time and time again. For a time, the flames of war raged in over 100 planes. Both sides fought back and forth, using the planes as the battlefield and the sea of stars as the stage. The large galaxies were thrown into chaos, and the flames of war raged everywhere. Grimm sat quietly in the duty hall, silently flipping through the Book of Darkness in his hands. Although the probability of the Book of Darkness providing high-level knowledge was very low, Grimm had accumulated quite a bit of mystical knowledge after reading and analyzing it for a long time. Inside the circular hall, the war reports are getting more and more bloody and urgent. Urgent report. Beastmen have appeared at the Myriad Flower Realm. They've already invaded the Uther Plane and are wantonly slaughtering the natives there. They're holding a blood sacrifice ceremony and seem to be summoning star beasts. The Uther Plane was a medium plane belonging to the sorcerer faction. If the Beastmen succeeded in the blood sacrifice, even if they killed the star beast afterwards, the entire plane would be shattered. There's an enemy at the cloud brightness line. An orc god's avatar has been discovered. Its rank is unknown. Emergency battle report from the cloud's sea front line. Orc level 7 god of Massacre Garen's true body has suddenly appeared. The battlefield has collapsed. Specific losses unknown. Urgent report from the wind front line. Rank 6 god of Hunt Holler of the Orc Divine System has been discovered. Rank 6 Great Wizard Urso, who is overseeing the front lines, is requesting reinforcements from the headquarters. Urgent report from the 11-star sector. The Orc God System's level 5 god of Violence Hephaestus and the god of Hatred Enos have entered the star battlefield. The situation at the front lines is critical. For some reason, these orc gods seem to have gone crazy and attacked everywhere. They would change after every shot they took, not giving the sorcerers a chance to surround and attack them. Most of the time, they fought with their true bodies, relying on their valiant fighting style and terrifying strength to defeat sorcerer legions one after another. Moreover, there seemed to be no pattern to their battles, and they seemed to be doing as they pleased. Even if they were sent to guard a small plane, they might suddenly encounter the true bodies of these orc gods who did not play by the rules. If that was the case, there was a high chance that the great sorcerers who carried out the mission would fall on the battlefield. For a time, the sorcerer faction was in a state of panic and panic. When all the great sorcerers heard that they had been assigned a mission, even if it was a simple, low-intensity mission, they were still scared and on tenterhooks. Faced with this situation, Giant Rock Castle also increased the probability of the great sorcerers being sent out to battle by rank 6 and even rank 7 great sorcerers. With enough great sorcerers, they managed to resist the orc gods' counterattack. As the cannon fodder of the great sorcerers, Grimm's frequency of going out to battle had also increased. The battle alarm lights in the flowery hall suddenly lit up. Wizard Gleason, who was sitting at the very front, tilted his head and listened for a while. His expression suddenly turned ugly. Grimm and Tissa Bihua go to the 11-star sector as reinforcements. Immediately, Grimm's heart skipped a beat when his name was called. The 11-star sector was not a good place to be. This mission was extremely dangerous. Although there were many thoughts in his mind, Grimm did not show it on his face. Instead, he stood up with the other 2 rank 5 sorcerers and went to the teleportation circle in the corner of the hall. After a flash of white light, Grimm and the others once again appeared in the unusually busy war hall. Under the guidance of the wizard puppet, they quickly arrived in front of a teleportation circle shrouded in silver light. There were hundreds of similar teleportation circles around, each leading to a different star sector or plane. A rank 5 great sorcerer in charge of dispatching was already waiting in front of the teleportation circle. When he saw Grimm and the others, he quickly reminded them in a low voice, "Be careful when you go there. The battle has already started, and the situation is quite chaotic. Your mission is to stabilize the situation. Don't let the wizard army there collapse, and don't let the 11-star sector fall to the orcs." "I can't guarantee that. After all, the orcs are crazy enough," Great Sorcerer Antusa muttered in dissatisfaction. He was obviously very unhappy about being sent to such a dangerous place. "Don't worry, the higher-ups will not mistreat you. The reward for this mission is double." The rank 5 sorcerer smiled and comforted them. Hearing this, Grimm and the others were overjoyed. They also knew that they could not simply disobey orders. This dangerous mission was destined to fall on their heads, and now that they had double the reward, the gloominess and dissatisfaction in their hearts dissipated by half. After stepping into the teleportation circle, the rank 5 sorcerer waved the silver token in his hand. Waves of white light emerged from the bottom, gradually covering the entire space. After a moment, a dazzling white light flashed, and the space trembled violently. However, it was all contained within the silver light. By the time the space returned to normal, the teleportation circle was already empty. The star sector they had crossed this time was obviously even further than the Gale plane. Even with Grimm's strong spiritual force, he felt waves of dizziness and disorientation. Relying on his strong physique to resist the corrosion of the distorted space, his body suddenly relaxed, and he arrived at his destination. Before he could open his eyes, Grimm's ears were filled with loud elemental explosions and beast-like roars. Grimm calmed himself down and opened his eyes. Only then did he realize that he was standing in a giant cave. Under his feet was the teleportation circle, and the bodies of his 2 companions were still slightly swaying, their bodies overflowing with dazzling magical light. Soon, they got over the dizziness that came with ultra-long-distance teleportation. After stabilizing their minds, they suddenly opened their eyes and looked around vigilantly. Outside the teleportation circle was a group of rank 2 sorcerers. Seeing the arrival of the 3 great sorcerers, they could not help but show joy on their faces, and they all came forward to greet them. Outside the cave, a series of explosions and violent tremors showed how intense the battle was. This caused Grimm and the other 2 great sorcerers to frown. The ultra-long-distance teleportation circle. This was the most cost-effective mobile transportation tool in the sorcerer faction. Most of the time, sorcerers would set it up at the back or in a tightly guarded area. They would never set it up so crudely and crudely. Now, they could hear the sounds of battle even though they were in the teleportation circle. This could only mean that the orcs had already broken through the sorcerer's defensive line, and the flames of war had spread to this safe zone. The situation was not good. The 3 of them looked at each other and walked out of the giant cave together. This time, they did not come to the inside of a plane, but a giant rock fortress floating in the depths of the endless sea of stars. The fortress was not small. It was 1,000 meters tall and at least 3 miles wide. On top of it was a giant rock fortress, and at the bottom was a rock foundation that was 200 to 300 meters thick. Every inch of space in the Boulder Battle Fortress was sparkling with a strange witchcraft radiance. Moreover, a gigantic circular light screen had been set up inside the Boulder Battle Fortress. At this moment, the light barrier was no longer complete. Above the main fortress, someone had broken a hole that was 100 meters wide. A large number of orc warriors riding ugly and ferocious-looking pterosaurs swooped down, launching a ferocious charge at the various parts of the fortress. Behind the orc troops stood 2 ferocious-looking orc gods. They were 10 meters tall, their bodies covered in strong muscles, and their mouths were wide and sharp. They were the god of violence, Hephaestok, and the god of hatred, Enos. From the looks of it, the 2 gods seemed to have descended with their true bodies, which meant that they could unleash 100% of their incomparably violent physical strength. The arrival of Grimm and the other two had undoubtedly attracted the attention of the two orc gods. Their cruel and violent gazes fell straight on the three grand sorcerers from a distance of more than 10 miles away. Since the reinforcements had arrived, the two great sorcerers who had been hiding in the rock fortress revealed themselves and responded to Grimm and the other two from afar. Chapter 1477. Be careful, these two are the true bodies of the gods. They're not the same as the clones you fought before. Be careful. As if worried that Grimm and the others would underestimate their enemies and lose, the two-tier 5 sorcerers stationed here hurriedly sent a message to Grimm and the others. It was the first time Grimm and the others had stepped into a large-scale planar battlefield like this, so it was inevitable that they lacked experience. Only after hearing the other party's message did they raise their spirits and quickly cast defensive spells on themselves and their companions. Asterisk whoosh whoosh whoosh. Asterisk rays of dazzling light illuminated half of the sky. In the blink of an eye, Grimm and the other two were surrounded by light. Layers upon layers of protective spells wrapped around them like colorful eggshells, protecting them tightly. As a law-defying wizard, Grimm had always been the most powerful cannon on the battlefield. There was no need for him to fight the two orc gods. Hence, he hurriedly cast defensive spells on himself and started chanting spells like a gust of wind, preparing for a large-scale fire spell. Ardos and Baihua were accompanying him. One was a bloodline wizard, and the other was a body refinement wizard. Naturally, they were not to be outdone. As they prepared for battle, they slowly approached the battlefield. Arturo roared as his eyes emitted a cold, dark green light. His entire body suddenly swelled up and strengthened. His nose and chin protruded forward, and 4 pairs of sharp fangs emerged from his mouth. Sharp claws grew on his hands and feet. Glossy black fur quickly grew on his body, and a strange spiral horn suddenly appeared on his forehead. When the strange horn lit up, Antuso's tall demonic wolf body gradually became transparent. Then, he completely hid himself. Demonic spectral wolf. Ardos actually had the extremely strange bloodline of the demonic spectral wolf. Meanwhile, the other anatomy refinery sorcerer, Baihua, was roaring continuously. His body had also grown from 2 meters to 3 meters, the muscles all over his body bulging. Like a terrifying, muscular giant, he pulled out a double-sided battle axe from his back and grinned maliciously as he slowly stepped onto the battlefield. The orc warriors that were crazily rushing into the light barrier jumped off the back of the pterosaurs and landed on the gray outer wall of Giant Rock Castle. They stepped on the rocks and charged towards the great wizards. Courting death, Arturo's disdainful sneer suddenly came from the void. Immediately after, a transparent wolf-shaped shadow suddenly emerged from the orc army. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Countless crisscrossing wolf claws slashed past, and all the orc warriors within 100 meters of him were instantly sliced into countless pieces as if they were being sliced by invisible blades. The specter demonic wolf chuckled, and with a flicker, it appeared in the middle of another group of beastmen warriors. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Another wave of wolf claws danced in the air, and in the blink of an eye, this team of orcs was also annihilated. This group of beastmen also included a Type 3 beastman powerhouse. Unfortunately, in the face of the absolute difference in strength, it was just like the low-tier orcs, unable to resist for even a second longer before turning into a pile of corpses on the ground. Little ones, spread out. Let me see if these two fellows are as powerful as they think they are. Seeing his subordinates being slaughtered, Haystock was the first to lose his patience. Haystock, the god of tyranny, looked like an abnormally tall and majestic orc. He was at least 10 meters tall, and the joints of his hands and feet were abnormally thick. The muscles on his body were so sturdy that it sent chills down one's spine. He wore a simple battle robe made of animal hide, and his right arm was exposed. He held a mace in his left hand and a flail in his right. The aura he gave off was that of a berserker. As he had a special domain of war, the god of tyranny, Haystock, was a very competent commander on a battlefield. As soon as he gave the order, the orcs, who had been filled with rage just a moment ago, quickly scattered to the sides, leaving enough space for the few powerhouses to fight. Under the disbelieving gazes of Grim and the rest, Haystock swayed his huge body, ignoring the huge difference in numbers between him and the enemy, and took the initiative to attack the physique refinement sorcerer, Baihua. One was a huge orc that was 10 meters tall, and the other was a physique refinement sorcerer that was 3 meters tall. Both of them walked the path of violence, and the difference in strength was not too great. However, once the battle began, the terrifying difference in strength was immediately revealed. With a charge, Haystock's mace and flail collided with Baihua's double-sided battle axe. Both of them bent their bodies at the same time, the muscles on their arms bulging. Incomparably violent strength passed through the weapons in their hands, madly colliding in the middle of the battlefield. Baihua, who was obviously at a disadvantage, had a change of expression. Before the stalemate lasted more than 3 seconds, he was sent flying by the surging force. He left a long trail of afterimages in the air, and like a bowling ball that had been sent flying, he smashed into the wall of one of the subsidiary buildings of Giant Rock Castle. With a loud bang that made everyone's eyes twitch, a large hole was formed in the wall, and Baihua instantly disappeared from everyone's sight. Hiss, Grim, who was rapidly casting spells, could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was the first time he had truly experienced the terror of a god's main body. Although Grim had never come into contact with a god's main body before, he had fought with a god's clone. He had thought that since they were both at grade 5, their strength was about the same, and that there was nothing to fear. However, today he had truly experienced the huge difference between a god's main body and a god's clone. They were simply not on the same level. A god's main body wielded a divine weapon that was most suitable for their fighting style, but the god's clones he had encountered in the past were mostly unarmed. A god's main body was supported by a powerful divinity and could draw a large amount of divine force from a faraway divine kingdom. A god's clone, on the other hand, was mostly made up of divinity fragments, and their strength was only a fraction of the main bodies. If one took into account the bonus of divinity and divinity, the difference in strength between the two would be even greater. Hence, even though they were both at grade 5, Haystock was still able to send Baihua flying out of the battlefield in a single exchange. Fortunately, Baihua was also a powerful grade 5. Although he had lost to Haystock, who had a halo of power, he did not suffer too much damage. Roar! With an enraged roar, Baihua once again transformed into a human head cannonball within the broken cave, dragging a series of afterimages behind him as he once again charged towards Haystock. Another spectral wolf, Entuso, silently appeared behind Haystock. 2 sharp front claws tore through the void and swiped at Haystock's back. A pincer attack. Although the two of them had never worked together and did not have much chemistry, as grade 5 magi, they were still capable of such simple coordination. At this moment, Grim had also finished casting his fire spell. He held a berserk spell in his hand, narrowing his eyes as he observed the battlefield, waiting for the best moment to attack. Facing a pincer attack from 2 magi of the same rank, Haystock did not panic or fear in the slightest. Instead, he laughed coldly a few times. His body shook, and in the blink of an eye, he transformed into a strange form with 6 arms. The 6 arms held 6 strangely shaped weapons: a greatsword, a scimitar, a single-sided axe, a flail, a spiked mace, and a cross pickaxe. Looking at the strange luster on their surfaces, it was obvious that they were 6 low-grade divine weapons with different effects. Although the ranks of the 6 divine weapons were not high, they were still divine weapons. They had the power to break through all elemental barriers and cut through all physical defenses. After the transformation, Haystock's body began to spin rapidly. His 6 arms grasped 6 strange divine weapons, and he attacked the anatomy refinery sorcerer and the demonic spirit wolf that were closing in on him. The two, who had originally wanted to pincer attack, did not expect such a turn of events. In the blink of an eye, they were caught unprepared. The two desperately attacked the huge body of their opponent, and at the same time, they did their best to dodge the terrifying divine weapons that dazzled their eyes. However, the 6 divine weapons rolled over like a wheel. They could not dodge this one, dodge that one, dodge that one, dodge that one, dodge this one. The two magi bitterly held on for 7 seconds. One after another, different divine weapons hit their shields, and they turned into meteors that flew into the sky, disappearing from sight. Of course, fighting 2 magi of the same rank at the same time did not come without paying a price. At the same time that the 2 magi were sent flying, dense claw marks suddenly appeared on his body, as well as 2 huge, bone-deep wounds. However, such an injury could only be regarded as a minor injury on his 10-meter-tall god body, and with a dazzling golden light rolling over his god body, those minor injuries instantly disappeared, and the 2 axe marks also quickly healed. Haystock laughed sinisterly, shaking the divine weapon in his hand. He planned to target the weaker spectral wolf and chase it to death. However, before he could move, a violent ball of flames flew over and engulfed his body in an instant. Since he had already opened fire, Grim did not hold back any longer. His body suddenly expanded to 10 meters tall, and golden flames rose around him. He stood rooted to the ground, waving his hands continuously. One golden fireball, after another containing inextinguishable flames, shot towards the god of Tyrant like a barrage of cannons. Bang, bang, bang. This kind of attack was simply unstoppable. At this moment, Grim had already turned into a humanoid catapult. One after another, violent fireballs with long golden tails cut through the void, bombarding the place where the god of Tyrant was standing. Almost in the blink of an eye, the place became a terrifying sea of fire. With a violent roar, Haystock waved his divine weapon and rushed out of the sea of fire. There were traces of burns on his body, but the golden flames that followed were blocked by a dense layer of divine light at a distance of 3 meters, unable to touch his body in the slightest. Divine barrier. Chapter 1478. Grim couldn't be blamed for gnashing his teeth. The divine force shield was just too domineering. Even though it was only a thin layer, it had a terrifying divine force that made people revere it. First of all, the most hateful point was that the divine power shield could isolate any magic effects and damage known to the world. This also meant that before the divine power on the shield was depleted, all control, poison, hypnosis, paralysis, dizziness, disease, acid, frost, lightning, fire, or sound wave effects would not work on a god. Secondly, with the divine force shield, a god was immune to physical effects such as interruptions, repulsion, stun, and shock. That was why in Grim's eyes, the divine force shield was simply invincible. As long as the divine force shield was active, a god could move unbridled on the battlefield without fear of being surrounded by enemies. They also did not have to worry about those disgusting physical and magical effects. Even a great wizard of the same rank would have to retreat when facing a god who could go on a killing spree. Hence, as soon as the divine barrier was activated, Hastic swept towards Grim like a whirlwind. The divine artifact's radiance smashed into Grim's face, causing his usually calm face to twitch. Shit! Grim started to run without hesitation. He used Flame Leap to move 1,000 meters away, then turn around and unleashed another barrage of flames. When the other party roared and charged at him again, Grim could only escape again and change locations to launch long-range attacks. In previous battles, Grim had engaged in close combat with many enemies, using his protective flames to burn the bodies of his enemies. But facing this god of violence, Grim didn't dare let him touch his body. Based on the shockwaves from a battle, Grim dared to say that the god of violence's basic strength was at least 50 points, while his vitality hadn't even reached 40 points. If he were to face him head-on, he would definitely be beaten to death. Thus, Grim could only run, not daring to face him head-on. But running was useless. If he didn't attack with all his might and didn't exhaust the divine force on the divine force shield, the battle would always be one-sided. Only by breaking the divine power barrier would Grim be able to use his berserk fire spell to force the other party to stop. Just as the two of them were in the midst of the chase, a huge wave suddenly rose up, and the physique refinement Magus, Bai Hua, who had been sent flying, roared and rushed back. "Bastard, you forced me to do this!" After being sent flying twice in a row, Bai Hua flew into a rage. As the blood in his body surged, his figure grew a little more. He waved his double-sided battle axe, and his body shone with layers upon layers of dazzling witchcraft radiance. He roared and rushed towards the tyrannical god again. At this moment, his body was already 5 meters tall. Although it was only half the height of his opponent, the surging violent power was already almost the same. Obviously, he had activated some kind of special witchcraft effect. Bam, bam, bam. Like forging iron, many god artifacts bombarded the double-sided battle axe one after another. Ripples of energy surged out, turning the entire battlefield into a mess. Any life or matter that came into contact with these ripples of energy would disintegrate in an instant. They would be minced into powder that could not be seen with the naked eye. The orcs and wyverns that were too close to the battlefield did not even have time to escape before they were caught up by the ripples of energy, exploding into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Even the indestructible giant rock castle's outer walls started to crumble under the repeated attacks of the ripples of energy, sinking in layer by layer. Bai Hua had used some unknown item to step in the air and resist the tyrannical god's majestic divine power. He was not sent flying again. However, his agility and attack speed were obviously inferior to his opponent's. He did not have as many hands or weapons as his opponent, so he was undoubtedly at a disadvantage in this confrontation. However, under his and Grim's frenzied attacks, the divine power barrier outside the tyrannical god's body was finally broken. The moment the divine power barrier was broken, the spectral wolf that had not appeared for a long time suddenly appeared above the tyrannical god's head. It opened its bloody mouth and viciously bit down. Facing the attacks of the three, the tyrannical god Hephaestus did not show the slightest bit of fear. He lifted his huge foot and stomped on the air, as if there was still a wide expanse of land there. The earth shook. At this moment, Hephaestus' strength was definitely above 55 points. The terrifying power shook the air, creating a strange earthquake effect around him. All the elements, energy, and particles within a kilometer were pushed out by the majestic divine power, forming an explosive shock wave. However, the shock wave did not send the two people around him flying like before. Instead, it made them tremble and faint on the spot. When a person's strength reached 40 points, he had the terrifying power to smash a mountain with a single punch. When a person's strength reached 50 points, he could even shatter the void, let alone the so-called flesh and blood. As for 55 points of strength, that was a level that only pure magi could reach. The tyrannical god relied on the innate berserk attribute of the beastmen, as well as the blessing of divine power and the power halo, to reach such a frightening level. Taking advantage of the time when the two magi were stunned, the tyrannical god waved the 6 divine weapons in his hand, planning to smash their heads. At this moment, Grim bombarded the tyrannical god's body with a violent fireball, followed by the grade 5 scorched earth, divine spell without hesitation. It had to be said that in order to threaten the body of a grade 5 god, only a high-grade divine spell or witchcraft with extremely condensed power could do it. Even with the tyrannical god strength, facing a complete grade 5 scorched earth divine spell, he could not withstand it. Roar! Hephaestus let out a painful and mournful howl towards the sky. From his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth, as well as the pores on his body, crimson flames hundreds of meters long shot out. The violent and ferocious flames even blasted Antuso and Bai Hua, who were still unable to move, and the god of violence, who remained in place, turned into a human-shaped torch. His entire divine body was scorched black. The originally golden orc had turned into a half-burnt chicken in an instant. The god of hatred, Enos, who had been watching the battle calmly from afar, also changed his expression. He roared angrily, planning to rush forward to help. The other two great magi who were stationed at the giant rock castle looked at each other and simultaneously cast a spell to intercept him halfway. "Bastard, you hurt my divine body. I'll take your life." This Tier 5 divine spell had once killed a lesser disaster lord, but it was still far from enough to kill a true god. The tyrannical god was indeed injured in a moment of carelessness. His face was covered in dirt, but it was only a light injury. It was not to the point where he could not endure it. Caught off guard by this grade 5 divine spell, the tyrannical god could not restrain his anger. He gave up on chasing after the two great magi and turned to charge at Grim. Seeing that the situation was far from good, Grim's body immediately exploded, transforming into flames as he fled into the distance. However, before Flame Jump could complete, the tyrannical god had already closed in on Grim and shouted towards the sky. A violent and formless sound wave shook the void, instantly stirring up the mana in a 100-meter radius. Grim's flame jump was inexplicably interrupted, and his body, which had just jumped halfway, was forced to reform. "Bastard, go to hell!" Taking advantage of this opportunity, the tyrannical god brandished his greatsword, which had the severing property, and the pickaxe, which had the soul-fixing property, smashing towards Grim. Grim sucked in a breath of cold air. The Book of Darkness in his hand instantly condensed a law barrier in front of him, following which an incomparably violent flame energy gushed out of the divine fire bead, stacking up into a dense layer of flame shields beneath the law barrier. Using this temporary obstruction, Grim's body forcefully exploded once more, splitting into 4 identical flaming humanoids. The 4 of them then split up and fled in different directions. With a series of explosions, the tyrannical god crushed Grim's various defenses and rushed to his original position. Sweeping his gaze across his surroundings, a cruel smile appeared on his face. "Die!" With a loud shout, the tyrannical god swung his arms wildly. 4 divine weapons of different shapes and sizes instantly caught up to the 4 flaming humanoids. Pung, 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 pung. Among the smaller flaming humanoids that had fled to the southwest corner, Grim staggered out. The part of his body that had been sliced by the one-sided axe had ruptured, and a large amount of blood gushed out. Damn it! The divine ability of this one-sided axe was actually behead. If Grim's life force was less than half when he was hit, there was a high chance that he would be killed in one hit. Fortunately, Grim was a long-range magus. Since the start of the battle, he had not been touched even once, so his life force was still intact. Otherwise, even so, the behead ability did not take effect, and the berserk attack of the rank 5 divine weapon still caused indescribable damage to Grim. Grim screamed in pain as he fled into the distance. However, before running away, Grim threw out his last rank 5 spell, the Ring of Decay, with hatred in his heart. "Brat, now you know how powerful I am. Leave your life behind." After beating Grim into a sorry state, the tyrannical god Haystock recalled his 4 divine weapons. With a sway of his body, he decided to continue chasing after Grim until he died. However, the purplish-black Ring of Decay had already arrived in front of him. "Haha, brat, stop struggling. Watch me." Haystock waved his divine weapon without a care, immediately destroying the Ring of Decay. Then, his expression changed drastically. "Bastard, this is level 5. Chapter 1479. Haystock's outdated knowledge had harmed him in the end. Among the grade 5 sorcerers he had met in the past, there were plenty who could cast grade 5 spells, so it wasn't surprising at all. However, those who could instantaneously cast a rank 5 spell were few and far between, to the point that it was almost unheard of. The majority of those capable of such a feat were Tier 5 powerhouses. However, the young fire magus in front of him did not seem like the latter. Of course, these grade 5 spells might not have come from the fire magus himself, but from some powerful magic tool or divine weapon. However, a newbie who had just stepped into 5th grade had 2 high-grade tools that could activate 5th grade spells. This was simply too inconceivable. It was precisely because of this knowledge that Hastic, who was not very sensitive to elements or laws, was at a disadvantage. If he had been able to detect that the purplish-black liquid was a grade 5 poison spell, he would not have been so shameless as to blow it up. This time, he was in deep trouble. The exploding corrosive liquid covered the surroundings in an instant. The sticky, smelly black liquid landed on his body, corroding it to the point where strange, sizzling sounds could be heard. Flows of thick smoke emitted from his god body, revealing the small holes on his body. Although the body of God was immune to all poisons in the world, it could not be completely immune to the poisonous liquid that contained the laws of poison. Haystock roared loudly, and a tremendous amount of divine power transmitted from the faraway divine kingdom washed over the divine body that was being ravaged by the soft feet again and again, cleansing the vicious laws that were eroding his divine body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Intuso and Baihua, who had fought for a long time without any results, charged forward once more. They surrounded the tyrannical god and began fighting again. Grim took the opportunity to slip away, gulping down mouthfuls of primary life, fluid, and high-grade healing potions as if they were free. Only then did he manage to force his body's regenerative abilities to heal the huge wound on his back. The primary life fluid was extracted from the essence of the tree of life of the elves. It was a life-saving divine water that could cure the dying and heal the bones in the plane. Unfortunately, for someone like Grim, whose life level had reached the limit of his physical body, the primary life fluid was not as effective as it could be. All it could do was stimulate his physical body and increase his basic recovery rate by a little. It was the same for high-tier healing potions. In order to have any effect, the only way was to drink them by the ton. Otherwise, his body of laws would be able to stop any external substances from modifying and contaminating his body. A battle between grade 5 beings was so terrifying that even after they occupied a large battlefield, the small fries below grade 5 could only hide far away, not daring to approach the battlefield. Even the Type 4 beastmen did not have the qualifications to participate in this level 5 battle. Inside the plane, with the help of the plane's power, a grade 4 existence might be able to contend against a grade 5 existence whose attack and defense were greatly reduced. However, once they left the planar space and entered the unrestrained starry void, the terrifying might of a Tier 5 life form was immediately revealed. Everyone below grade 5 was immortal. Only by surpassing grade 5 could one become a god in a single step and become a god-level life form that could roam the multiverse. The few people present were undoubtedly peerlessly powerful divine-level life forms. Thus, when they fought, the entire battlefield encompassed a huge space with a radius of nearly 100 kilometers. They could travel thousands of meters with a single flash, and dozens of kilometers with a single leap. Every punch and kick would cause ripples of power to sweep through the void and shatter stars. If they were in the planar space, the battle between these 7 divine-level life forms would be enough to destroy a small planar space. Even if it was a middle-sized planar space, after being tossed around like this, most of them would be on the verge of death. It cannot be helped. The power they possessed far exceeded the limits of planar space creatures. They could split mountains with a single punch, split the earth with a single kick, and destroy everything within 100 kilometers with a single spell. In their frenzied battle, what they destroyed was not only the real matter that existed in reality, but also the formless and intangible planar space's laws. In the space they resided in, even the planar space had to give way to them. Wherever their power extended, the planar space's laws would be tampered with and rewritten, and the planar space's law system would be thrown into chaos. No matter how powerful the planar space's will was, it could not extinguish these strange laws that contained strong individual wills. It could only retreat step by step and lose its bargaining chips bit by bit. Fortunately, this was an empty starry void. Apart from the undulations and surging tides of mana, there was no annoying planar space's will. Thus, the few of them used their strengths to the fullest, and fought in the depths of the void where the energy radiation was shocking. The world collapsed. The orc warriors who were caught up in the god-level battle did not even have the chance to cry out before they were shredded into pieces by the energy ripples. On the other hand, the main force of the Magi had the support of the Boulder Fortress, which allowed them to avoid the waves of invading energy ripples. However, a small part of the outermost structure of the Boulder Fortress had collapsed, and they lost many wizard beasts and low-ranked Magi. This battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. When both sides were at their wits' end, the two orc gods led their troops and retreated resentfully. There was no helping it. Both sides were almost equal in power, and if one side wanted to completely destroy the other, they would have to pay a high price. It was obvious that both sides had no intention of making such sacrifices, and so they could only accept this helpless outcome. The two great Magi guarding the fortress originally wanted Grimm and the others to stay in the fortress to rest and recover, but they refused. They dragged their injured bodies and used the teleportation formation in the fortress to return to the military headquarters. Although they did not gain anything from this battle, they had successfully repelled the attack of the two orc gods. Thus, they immediately received double the mission reward, and the 3 of them were given half a year's rest. Only then did they nod goodbye and return to their respective residences. It had to be said that after this experience of going through trials and tribulations together, Grimm and Tusa and Bai Hua's relationship instantly changed from strangers to familiarity. They also exchanged spells and contact methods, becoming true companions. Since he had become a grade 5 great magus, he could no longer walk alone like he had in the past. He wanted to get to know more great Magi and build a wider network of connections. This was also a way to increase his personal power and status in a short period of time. After all, Grimm also had enemies outside. Great Magus Mesa was a grade 7 great magus, and she must have a considerable amount of influence in the Magus faction. If Grimm had no one to rely on and could not even find a helper, it would be easy for him to be alone at crucial times, and he would be easily manipulated by others. That was why Grimm was so enthusiastic about participating in the expansion of the Magus civilization, using the method of unity to resist the possible plots and schemes. He was also constantly probing and observing the internal division of the Magus civilization to determine his position in the future. This was not him cursing the Magus civilization, but what he had seen and heard with his own eyes. The Magus civilization had never been a single entity. It had been divided into many Magus factions with different values and development directions. For example, he was currently in the Sorcerer faction, which was led by a grade 8 sorceress named Barbara. They were a group that targeted the orcs. The entire battle was completely dependent on the will of Barbara, and she was the mastermind behind this battle. In this group, Grimm was at most a general who had just gotten rid of his status as a small soldier. Moreover, Grimm had specifically investigated and found that Barbara had nothing to do with the Northern Witches. Otherwise, he would not have dared to come here, even if he was beaten to death. According to his investigation, it seemed that the Northern Witches formed their own system and did not like to mix with other Magi. This caused the Northern Witches to be ostracized by other factions, and a relationship between them was not that harmonious. Now, he could only hope that this witch Barbara was tough enough to block out the power of the Medusa. Only in this way could he grow steadily and become stronger step by step. As soon as he left the duty hall, Grimm unexpectedly ran into an acquaintance, Sanazar. She seemed to have been waiting for him here for a long time. After seeing Grimm, she looked a little awkward and stopped him. Lord Sarubo wants to see you. Sarubo? Grimm pondered for a moment and felt that it was not a big problem, so he agreed. He followed Sanazar, who was hidden in the purple fog, around Giant Rock Castle. They passed through many winding corridors and passageways, and finally stopped at the entrance of a residence on the upper level of the castle. Here, Senazar bowed and retreated to the side, not saying anything. It seemed that she had no intention of following Grim in. As Grim walked past her, he tilted his head and examined her. His gaze caused Senazar's heart to beat wildly, and she looked embarrassed and angry, but she forced herself to remain silent. "If you have nothing to do tomorrow, come to my residence. I'll compensate you appropriately." Saying this, Grim ignored Senazar's expression and pushed open the door to the residence, walking in. Inside the residence, a middle-aged wizard with a vaguely familiar appearance was waiting silently. Seeing Grim's arrival, the wizard's gaze fell straight on him. Beep detected undulations of special laws. After analysis, the target is an amalgamation of high-ranked laws. Within 100 meters, the target has absolute suppression of laws. Host, please remain vigilant. Grim smiled wryly in his heart, but his expression remained the same. He respectfully bowed to the middle-aged magus. Chapter 1480. I know you. Great Magus Salubo still gave Grim the feeling that he was unfathomable. Seriously speaking, he was a powerful magus worthy of Grim's admiration. Looking at his history, he was not inferior to Grim in terms of speed and excitement. In fact, there were many areas where he was even better than Grim. Hence, facing an old senior from the Central Continent, Grim was naturally very respectful, his heart filled with sincere respect. At the end of the day, the conflict between Grim and Salubo's family was just a common method of suppression and checks and balances within the family. However, Grim's development had obviously exceeded the path of a normal magus, causing the higher-ups of the family to make one wrong move after another, causing the situation to spiral out of control. These conflicts might be a huge matter within the plane, but once they left the magus world, when the rank 5 Grim and the rank 6 Salubo sat opposite each other and smiled at each other, everything in the past seemed like child's play. It was so childish and laughable, not even worth mentioning. Before I came in, I'd already arranged to meet Senazar. Grim took the initiative to express his stance. Senazar is too hot-tempered and can't tolerate even a grain of sand at her eyes. If she knew when to back off, she wouldn't have made things so awkward with you. Salubo could not help but sigh. But you can't blame her entirely. After all, even I was wrong about you. I didn't expect you to develop so quickly. It seems like you have the aura of a chosen child of heaven. Chosen child of heaven. That's a scary title. Grim could not help but smack his lips, looking like he could not accept it. Don't take this title too seriously. There are countless other chosen children of heaven in the multiverse. The world would never bet all its chips on a single person. Salubo chuckled. According to what you've said, I'm afraid Lord Grim can also be called a chosen child of heaven. Haha, if you want to understand it that way, it's not impossible. After all, if you can become a grand wizard in the beginning, they all thought that they were chess pieces that had escaped from the chessboard. Only when their horizons and state of mind were higher would they realize that they were still in the chessboard. It was just that the chessboard had become bigger. For some reason, Great Wizard Salubo was especially emotional today. His words were filled with endless meaning. Sir, Grim was a little confused. It's nothing. Seeing you reminded me of myself when I first came out of the Magus world, and I felt a little emotional. Salubo sighed. Sir, it's my first time coming out of this dimension, and I don't know much about the current situation in the sorcerer camp. I wonder if Sir can give me an answer? Magus faction? What do you want to know? However, I'll say this first. According to the customs of us Magi, I won't hand over anything valuable to you for free. It has to be a fair trade. I just completed a few quests, so I still have some mana crystals. Don't try to fool me with magical crystals. How can information of this level be exchanged for magic crystals? Great Wizard Salubo had a faint smile on his face. Grim chuckled and said, I also got some origin substance. Then origin substance it is. Sarubo clapped his hands and said, You just left this plane, so I don't think you have anything good that I'd like. Let's use origin substance as payment. The price of asking a question is 200 Sith origin substance. How about it? Do you accept it? 200 Sith origin substance for one question. Grim sucked in a breath of cold air, but when he thought about it, he felt that it was only natural. Anything that could be obtained from the great Magus Cerubo would definitely be the deepest secrets of the Magus civilization, which was something he needed urgently. Thus, giving up some origin substance to exchange for information was not a bad idea. All right, I accept. Then you can ask your question now. Remember, think carefully before you ask. Grim hesitated for a while, but in the end, he still asked his first question. How is the current Magus faction divided? Are you so sure that the Magus civilization has already divided? Kid, your questions are very opportunistic. Cerubo chuckled, his eyes full of praise. This question has been bothering me for a long time. Logically speaking, with the three ancient kings leading the Magus civilization, it should be flourishing. However, from what I've observed, the Magus civilization's internal structure is loose and messy, and there is serious internal strife. This is truly inconceivable. Grim did not hold back, directly voicing his opinion. Cerubo shook his head and sighed. The reason is simple. The three ancient kings have not shown themselves for tens of thousands of years. Grim's heart trembled, but he did not reply, instead listening attentively with confidence. You're right. The current Magus civilization is like a group of dragons without a leader and is split into many different factions. Each faction's direction of development is different, but the core of each faction is a famous great grade 8 Magus. Only the three ancient kings were able to reach the final step of the Magus civilization, and the number of grade 8 magi behind them is in the double digits. Many of them have chosen to live in seclusion or hide in secret planes, and rarely show their faces in the outside world. Currently, there are 4 known grade 8 magi. One of them is Sorceress Barbara, who is currently leading the war against the Orc Pantheon. As for her, she is also from the Scattered Tower Forest. Let me tell you something else. Witch Barbara doesn't have a good relationship with the Northern Witches. That's why you've chosen to join this team. You got a good eye. All right, that's all I'll answer to your first question. Ask the second one. Grim gritted his teeth. I want to know the basic situation of the other 3 factions. 3 factions count as 3 questions. All right, then I'll tell you in detail. The core grade 8 magi of the other 3 factions are Great Magus Willie, Great Magus Fontini, and Great Magus Curtis. They're from the Silver Alliance, the Northern Witches, and the Magus Association, respectively. You seem to have heard it. That's right. The 4 factions that are leading the Magus civilization's attacks also correspond to the Magus world's forces. There are exactly 4 of them. Currently, the Great Magus Willie's main target is the Demon Eye Empire. The area they're fighting in is limited to the Demon Eye Empire. The Magi are in charge of attacking, while the Demon Eye Empire is in charge of defending. The Great Magus Fontini's main target is the Elven Empire. Both sides have been fighting in many planes for hundreds of years. Currently, the Magi are in charge of attacking, while the Elves are in charge of defending. The only exception is the Great Magus Curtis. His target is the rank 8 Abyssal Demon King, Brusta. It's said that the Great Magus Curtis has already occupied a territory in the Abyss realm that's comparable to the main plane. There, he's resisting the attacks of hordes of abyssal demons. The demons are in charge of attacking, while the Magi are in charge of defending. Grim listened attentively and memorized all these unfamiliar names in his mind. Right now, he was a complete newbie. His understanding of the Magus civilization's current state came from books, and they were all old antiques and information from hundreds of years ago. Instantaneous knowledge was seriously outdated, and he needed to supplement it with authoritative information. I also want to know more about Medusa. Shut up, Cerubo shouted, interrupting Grim's inquiry. He then waved his hand and drew a rune in the air, turning it into a blue ray that flew into the floor. In the blink of an eye, a special talisman seal sealed the residence tightly. After doing all this, Sarubo turned his gaze back to Grim and said sternly, "Remember, kid, next time when you're not prepared, don't casually mention the names of high-ranking magi, especially someone like the great Magus Medusa, who's good at divination. Every time you mention her name with malice, she'll sense it even if she's millions of miles away. If you're someone she pays special attention to, then she'll eavesdrop on your next words." Grim was shocked. He'd never heard of such a thing before. If what the great Magus Sarubo said was true, then the great Magus Medusa's ability to sense fate was too terrifying. "Then can I say that name now?" Grim asked carefully. "Although there's a spell to isolate it, it's still not too safe. So, when you mention her in the future, you'd better use that woman or some other similar words. In short, don't mention that name again." "Yes," Grim asked in a low voice. "Sir, I want to know something about that woman. The northern witches have always been xenophobic, and their actions are mysterious and strange. The woman you're talking about is even more mysterious. I don't know the specifics, but I know that she lives in seclusion in a place called the Domain of Destiny and never goes out. However, many magi will often take the initiative to visit her when they have a request. But the price of asking her to use divination is not low. Every powerhouse who visits her has to do something for her, or they have to pay a huge price. So, her reputation has never been good. Where is the Domain of Destiny?" Grim couldn't help but ask through gritted teeth. The great Magus Rubo looked at him with a strange expression and said, "That's another question, but since you didn't do anything to my family, I'll let you off the hook. I'll count it as your 5th question. The Domain of Destiny is a secret plane. It doesn't have specific coordinates. If you want to go there, you have to get her invitation. The way to get it is to visit the clones of the witches scattered in different camps outside the Domain of Destiny. There's one in the Exorta camp." Chapter 1481. By the time Grim came out of Salubo's residence, he had 2,700 Sith's Spherote in his possession. Even though he controlled a new organization in the sorcerer world and risked his life to carry out many missions, Grim only had a total of 4,600 Sith's Spherote in his possession. Now that he had used up more than half of his Spherote in one go, even he felt pained. However, compared to the information he obtained and the vague information leaked out, Grim felt that it was worth it. He had gained quite a lot. After Grim returned to his residence, Senazar came as promised that night. Both of them hid in the secret room for a while before Senazar floated away. Grim lost another 300 Sith's Spherote in his pouch. After sending Senazar off, Grim did not rush back to the fire elemental plane. Instead, he stayed in the Boulder Fortress to recuperate. It had to be said that the injuries inflicted by the tyrannical god were quite severe. Although he did not die on the spot after being hit by a divine weapon with a kill characteristic, his soul had suffered a terrifying divine impact. From the flesh to the soul, it was an all-around pain and all-around damage. Physical injuries were easy to heal, but it was much more difficult to heal the damage to the soul. In the next half a year, Grim soaked himself in all kinds of healing holy water every day, slowly recovering from the aftermath of the previous battle. Just as he recovered from his injuries, he was met with a new round of attacks. In the sea of clouds, outside the barrier of the alien light plane, as a dazzling light blossomed in the depths of the starry sky, Grim and the other 5 great wizards appeared in the teleportation formation. Grim quickly recovered from the discomfort brought by the teleportation. He opened his eyes and carefully looked at the vast and majestic plane battlefield in front of him. This time, the planar war did not take place in the plane, but outside the barrier. The teleportation formation under Grim's feet was engraved on a huge green square brick that occupied an area of 100 meters. 4 bronze statues of dark demonic dragons were placed at the 4 corners of the array. They were holding up a translucent magic barrier that blocked the flying corpses outside. In the center of the battlefield, 100 miles away, 2 terrifying giants that were over 100 meters tall were valiantly fighting against each other. One was a blue giant, and the other was an orc god. Both of them chased each other in the center of the battlefield at a speed that was far beyond anyone's imagination. Every time their power clashed, it would trigger a tsunami of mana that swept across the battlefield. Every time they raised their hands or moved their feet, the energy waves would be so terrifying that when Grimm's gaze fell on them, the AI chip's feedback was a glaring red light. 7th grade. The two giants fighting were both grade 7. Not a single helper could be seen within 30 li of the two Type 7 powerhouses. 15 kilometers away, for grade 6 magi and two gods were locked in combat. It was clear that the orc god had the upper hand. Shifting his line of sight for another 10 kilometers, he finally saw an even larger number of Tier 5 battlefields. The Grand Wizards and the orc gods were roaring and fighting bravely, stirring up the void of the vast sea of stars. Energy was surging madly. The background radiation from the AI chip alone caused Grimm's heart to tremble. Even the lowest-leveled Tier 5 battlefields could radiate up to 3,000 to 4,000 degrees of radiation. Ordinary grade 4 magi would find it hard to survive there, let alone fight. Even someone like Grimm, who had the chaotic physique, would find it difficult to move in such a cruel environment, and he had to be even more careful. If he was not careful, he would be targeted by the enemy, and it would be extremely difficult to escape with his life. Asterisk bang. Asterisk. While Grimm was observing the battlefield, the figures of three great wizards appeared on another teleportation brick not far from them. They were also grade 5 wizards. It seemed like the magi of other regions were gathering here, and an imminent small-scale battle was about to break out. Let's go. Pay attention to your position. Don't get too close. One of the magi laughed sinisterly as he took the lead and charged forward. This time, the only person who came with Grimm was Antuso, who was an acquaintance. The two exchanged glances and flew out of the teleportation brick without a word, quickly approaching the grade 5 battlefields. Let's work together in the battle later and see if we can get anything out of it. Ardos had already transformed into a spectral demon wolf form once more, vanishing his figure as he secretly transmitted his voice to Grimm. Grimm understood what Ardos meant and transformed into a 10-meter-tall flame giant without hesitation. Nagus, Hentam, heavenly flame descent. Following the short incantation, Grimm pointed at the clone closest to him. Red light gathered above the clone's head, and clouds of fire roiled, forming a sea of crimson flames that was 100 meters wide. And when the sea of flames boiled to a certain degree, with a plop, a fireball soaked in violent flame energy fell from within. And this was just the beginning. Following that, fireballs fell from the sky one after another, bombarding the orc god's body. Every fireball that came into contact with it would explode into a huge fireball, the raging flames inside burning everything in their path. The opponent that Grimm had chosen was obviously a clone of a god. It was a grade 5 clone of the god of the hunt, Holler. The clone of the god of hunting Hall was a robust orc with a scarlet face, indigo skin, and a strange spear in his hand. There were 3 other grade 5 god-rank companions in front and behind him. There was a ferocious mastiff lying at his feet, a purple falcon perched on his shoulder, and a terrifying venomous snake coiled around his body. However, a clone was just a clone, not the real body. Hence, the spear in his hand and the companions beside him were just projections of divine force, not the real body. Otherwise, Grimm would not be interested in stirring up such a hornet's nest. The berserk fireballs bombarded Holler's clone, causing him to dodge continuously. However, part of his body was still set ablaze. Using divine force to disperse the law of fire within the inextinguishable flames, the so-called inextinguishable flames were extinguished. Holler's clone was infuriated by this attack, abandoning his original opponent and leaping towards Grimm. Before the clone arrived, the spear arrived first. Phantom spears traversed thousands of meters in the air, continuously hurling towards Grimm. The AI chip's energy analysis showed that each attack had a strength of 7,000. Although the intensity of the attack hadn't reached the Tier 5 standard of 10,000 degrees, its advantage lay in its swift and continuous attacks. It was not possible to injure Grimm's body with these phantom spears, but it was a good way to break through the defensive spells around his body. Hence, Haller's clone rapidly approached while using the phantom spears to force Grimm to move. Beep. Host has been locked on by the enemy. Initial determination is that the target has a divine domain of tracking. From now on, any attacks from the target will automatically lock onto the host position. Grimm looked up, and only then did he realize that a phantom golden arrow had appeared above his head, aiming straight at him. No matter how he dodged or moved, no matter where his flames jumped, the phantom golden arrow was still pointing at him, as if it had already locked on to the space above his head. This was probably the special lock-on effect of the divine domain of tracking. How King annoying. With this tracking arrow, no matter how Grimm tried to escape, it was useless. Haller's clone did not even need to aim, and any random attack would land on Grimm's body without fail. The only thing Grimm could do was to intercept the opponent's attack, or else he would have to face it head-on. *******. 3 consecutive flaming leaps failed to shake off the tracking arrow, and instead, half of the flaming barrier around his body was destroyed by the opponent. Grimm flew into a rage and no longer tried to dodge. Instead, he summoned violent flames to attack Hall's doppelganger. The Haller's clone was also extremely cunning. He used his swift body to dodge most of Grimm's attacks, and while attacking Grimm with the phantom spears, he pursed his lips and whistled. As the whistling sounded, the ferocious mastiff and the wild falcon turned into two strange figures, one black and one purple, and pounced on Grimm from two different angles. On the other hand, the strange giant python was still coiled on the body of Hall's clone. It flicked its scarlet tongue and stared at the surrounding void with a pair of green snake eyes. It could be seen that although they did not notice Antuso's presence, the python could still sense the approaching danger with its strange, beastly instinct. The ferocious mastiff had sharp claws and teeth that were attached with a terrifying tearing effect. If its attack really landed on the enemy, it would also have various effects such as breaking tendons and bleeding. The wild falcon was like a purple lightning bolt, quickly weaving and turning in the air. Its movements were extremely smooth, making it difficult to capture its real figure. It would also occasionally let out a piercing cry, which had the special effect of disturbing one's mind. Even with Grimm's shrewdness, he was still flustered by these two fellows who cooperated well with each other. Since he had a plan, he had to pay the price. Grimm roared and summoned the Book of Darkness in his body, releasing Remy the poison spirit to help him defend against the enemy's attacks. Only then did he let go of all his worries and condense the flames of law, ferociously doing the evil work of roasting dogs and birds. Large swathes of golden flames spread in all directions, turning the area within a kilometer into a continuous sea of fire. Grimm stood in the middle of the sea of fire, resisting the crazy attacks of multiple enemies, chasing the hateful mastiff with the terrifying transparent and colorless flames. Chapter 1482. A creature that could reach the divine level, even if it was just an ordinary mastiff when it was alive, would become a terrifying monster like a demon god. Moreover, the animal companions chosen by the god of Hunhowl were all terrifying magical beasts with outstanding abilities. Thus, after they ascended to the god level, their terrifying battle prowess was something that even a powerful fire wizard like Grimm found hard to deal with, and he found it hard to deal with. However, with the help of Remy, who is also a grade 5 poison spirit, Grimm was able to withstand most of the God of Hunt's attacks. In order to kill that detestable divine mastiff, Grimm even had to use a grade 5 trump card, the Ring of Decay. With a soft swoosh, a small opening appeared in the air 10 meters behind Grimm, and the detestable divine mastiff silently leapt out. With 2 swipes of its claws, it broke through Grimm's flaming shield, completely ignoring the damage caused by the flames. It pounced on Grimm's flaming calf and viciously bit it. The flames shattered and lava gushed out. The divine mastiff screamed miserably after being drenched in lava. Ignoring the blisters on its body and face, it stepped into the air and dodged Grimm's flaming hand. Most of its black fur had already been melted away by the high temperature of the lava, revealing its horrifying body covered in scabs and blisters. However, this kind of injury was still bearable for the divine mastiff. It stepped into the air and dodged here and there, planning to slip away from the enraged Grade 5 fire wizard. Seeing this, the purple eagle in the distance raised its neck and let out a sharp cry. It folded its wings and turned into a bolt of purple lightning, rushing towards Grimm's face. The eagle's powerful claws that could pierce through metal were extended in advance, ready to leave an unforgettable memory in the instant it brushed past Grimm. Further away, the god of Hunt Howl's clone also took the opportunity to surround Grimm. The 5-meter-long spear in his hand turned into streaks of golden afterimages, bombarding Grimm's external defenses from afar. The three of them were indeed old friends who had worked together for a long time. Their sneak attack, pincer attack, and support tactics were perfect. However, when Grimm made up his mind to kill them, even if he had to pay a price, it was useless no matter how perfect their teamwork was. "Remy, stop that purple eagle." Grimm sent a message to Remy with a psychic wave. He ignored the attacks of Purple Hawk and Hall's doppelganger and began to deal with the abominable big dog with short-distance teleportation and flesh-tearing effects. Grimm suddenly stomped his foot, and hundreds of crimson streams of flames shot out in the air 100 meters around him. The locations where the flames appeared were chaotic and random. They rose and fell one after another, making it difficult for anyone to predict. However, the divine mastiff seemed to be able to sense where the flames were going to erupt in advance. It dodged left and right in the void, and was always able to evade the pillars of flames by a hair's breadth. Seeing that his opponent was about to escape from his attack range of 100 meters, Grimm shouted, "Flame cage!" In the next second, the fire elements in the air quickly gathered around the divine mastiff like building blocks, forming a flaming cage that trapped it within. In the face of such a predicament, the celestial mastiff remained completely calm. It reached out with its 2 front paws and unleashed a series of extremely sharp claws imbued with a peculiar divine power, tearing the fiery cage into pieces. However, this short moment gave Grimm another chance to cast a spell. Gamelio Canas, Land of Fire Serpents. As Grimm completed his spell, the space beneath the divine mastiff suddenly turned crimson, and countless terrifying fire serpents stretched out from it, their heads and tails joined together. There were so many of them that they wrapped around the divine mastiff's body in the blink of an eye, making it difficult for the mastiff to move. The mastiff barked angrily and started to bite with its claws, try to break free. With its strength, even though the Land of Fire Serpents was at the peak of rank 4, it would still be difficult to trap it for more than 5 seconds. Unfortunately, 5 seconds was more than enough for a legendary fire wizard. Without hesitation, Grimm threw the rank 5 poison spell Ring of Decay on the mastiff's body. As soon as the Ring of Decay entered its body, the mastiff's body suddenly turned black. Its fur-exposed skin, flesh, and bones started to wither at a speed visible to the naked eye. The Hall's divine energy in its body was also contaminated, and it started to rot along with the mastiff's body. In less than 20 seconds, the divine mastiff, which possessed frightening combat power, fell to Grimm's hands. Seeing that his old friend, who had accompanied him for countless years, was rapidly crystallized and shattered under the black halo, the Hall clone who was at the periphery roared and charged at Grimm with large strides. In fact, the mastiff that Grimm killed was only a soul projection. Its real body was still by Hall's side. However, as a friend of many years, seeing the mastiff killed in such a cruel manner, the Hall clone could not bear it even if it knew that it was just a soul projection that could be replicated infinitely. With a roar, the Hall clone rushed towards Grimm, while the purple eagle was blocked by Remy. Both sides exchanged blows in the void, and it was hard to tell who had the upper hand. The giant python that was coiled around the Hall clone's divine body suddenly slithered down under the Hall clone's command, winding around Grimm's back. However, just as the Hall clone launched a fierce attack at Grimm, Grimm's eyes lit up, and he took the initiative to meet the attack. The demonic ghost wolf Antuso, who had been hiding at the side for a long time, also quietly circled to the back of Hall's clone. He had already accumulated his aura to the extreme, ready to unleash an earth-shattering attack at any time and place. Asterisk dong dong dong. Asterisk 3 golden spears were thrown at him in a row. With Grimm's agility and huge body, it was difficult for him to dodge them. Therefore, he slightly swayed his flaming body, allowing the spears to pierce through his right chest, lower abdomen, and left leg, creating 3 huge bloody holes the size of wash basins. Crimson flames that were as viscous as blood flowed out of the wounds, and Grimm could not help but groan. Blazing flame refinement, flame impact. Grimm endured the pain and roared. A stream of flames made of pure law flames shot out and hit the divine shield that Hall's clone had created. "Oomph. I've finally forced you to use your divine force shield," Grimm muttered inwardly. There was nothing he could do about it. The divine force shield that every god's avatar could control was simply the natural enemy of Magi. During its duration, it could isolate all magical effects and resist all magical and physical damage. If he did not destroy it beforehand, he would always have a great weapon that could save his life at a critical moment. At that time, it would be wishful thinking to kill him. In order to lure his opponent into using his divine force shield, Grimm had to use himself as bait, using a wild and ferocious manner to oppress his opponent. However, once the divine force shield was activated, it would be Grimm's turn to be oppressed in the next 10 moves. After seeing the divine force shield, Grimm did not hesitate to activate the law protection of the Book of Darkness. He also began to use his burning domain to burn the divine force shield, hoping to quickly exhaust the divine force on it. As for the Hall Avatar's golden spear, it kept stabbing at the nomological protection. Every time it stabbed, it would cause the nomological light membrane to cave inwardly, stirring up terrifying ripples. The 10-meter-long terrifying python was also coiled up, completely disregarding the law flames that were burning its body. It was still trying its best to tighten its body, causing the law light membrane to crackle and explode. Meanwhile, its upper body, which was coiled up high, had its mouth wide open like a snake, accumulating power as it waited. It looked as if it would swallow down the moment the light membrane was broken. "Help me break the shield." Grimm sent a witchcraft message to Antuso while attacking furiously. Even though the timing was not ripe yet, the demonic wolf Antuso had already appeared behind Hall's doppelganger as promised, and the ferocious blow that he had been accumulating for a long time landed squarely on the divine shield. Sensing the sudden appearance of a Tier 5 enemy, Hall's doppelganger's expression changed slightly. He could not be bothered to attack Grimm anymore. Instead, he planned to retreat. But then, a crisp cracking sound came from the divine power shield, and everyone's expression changed at the same time. One side was shocked, while the other side was overjoyed. The expressions of both sides formed a stark contrast. Kacha-kacha. Fine cracks began to appear on the divine power shield and spread rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the cracks had spread to every corner of the shield. In the next moment, the divine power shield shattered soundlessly, dissipating into countless sparkling and translucent divine power radiance that melted into the mana tide. The divine body of Hall's doppelganger was finally exposed to the 2 Tier 5 great sorcerers. Kill. There was no need to shout or encourage them. The moment they thought about the flawless quintessence shard in the other party's body, Grimm and Antuso became extremely ferocious, as if they had drunk a berserk potion. They entangled Hall's clone with all their might. As the god of hunting, Hall's doppelganger's melee combat techniques were top-notch. He was not at a disadvantage, even though he was fighting 2 enemies at once. However, for some reason, When the doppelganger saw the greedy and hungry gazes of the two great warlocks, he could not help but shudder involuntarily. Damn it! I can't fight these two bastards for too long. I need to escape first, then think of a follow-up attack. While pondering, Hall's doppelganger brandished his spear and parried Antus's swift and fierce attacks. He then slowly slithered away. At this point, he could no longer care about his so-called jungle companions. Hall's doppelganger ordered the python to entangle Grim while he endured Antus's attacks and tried his best to escape from his pincer attack. However, before he could move more than a few meters away, he felt an ominous gust of wind behind him. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.